I just have somebody.
Testing mic 2. Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3.
I have.
Testing the presenter mic. Test, test.
Out of that for you in a second.
Testing mic 3.
And you'd run to the mic.
Testing mic 4.
After.
Testing moderator.
Run to the mic. Give it another. Yeah, you know. The clerk informs me that we have a budget, but we have a budget. I wish we did. That we have a quorum. That was wishful thinking. So I want to start with some opening remarks and announcements. First is a sad one. I learned today of the death of Tim Sullivan, who many of you probably don't know, but you've seen his work, and he's the fellow who, until a few years ago, would put together the combined reports in the basement of the town hall and get them out, and he always did it with good cheer, and he was just a wonderful guy to deal with, and we'll all miss him. And I also want to recognize.
He's dead? You're saying he's dead?
Yes, he passed. Yeah. I'd like to say something about the seating arrangements tonight. Everyone saw what was going on out front, and we can probably expect a larger audience from the public than we're used to. So town meeting members should be sitting in front of the barriers, and then the public will be sitting in back of the barriers. Department staff will be sitting in the very back and the front row if they're being called on. We have the front on the side that is seating for press. I don't see any press here right now, but I suspect we'll have some. And what am I missing? But those are the general seating arrangements. So if the room fills up, and it becomes, if the public starts bleeding into the town meeting, we'll have to kind of deal with it. I want to say something about questions last night. Whenever we've gone through the budget, it's really an opportunity to ask department heads questions about operations and policy and stuff like that. But town meeting may not be the best place to do it all the time. And there are other places you can do it, and you might get better, more complete responses, and you may be even able to have a dialogue with department heads. So for example, you can contact them directly, or you can also participate in the advisory committee subcommittee hearings where they go through the budgets of all the departments. And those tend to be conversations rather than structured debates like we have here. And they tend to be free flowing and they tend to have a dialogue. So I would suggest those avenues may be more productive, but I'm not going to discourage questions here. I just want to make you aware of those other options that you may get. You may be able to have more of a dialogue. You'll be able to ask follow-up questions where you can't really do it here. So I throw that out to you. I also want to say something about the advisory committee. The advisory committee, I served on the advisory committee for about 15 years in total. And I always felt it was an honor to serve on the advisory committee. And I know all of the folks on the advisory committee feel that way. And as I appoint folks to the advisory committee going forward, I'm going to be looking for people who do think it's an honor and a privilege. The advisory committee, it's unbelievable the amount of hours the advisory committee puts in and the quality of the analysis. And sometimes they have to tell town meeting stuff that you just don't want to hear. But you're free to disagree with them. But to disparage them, I think, is wrong. You can disagree, but not disparage. So I thank the advisory committee. I thank everybody. Everybody who serves on the advisory committee. And they're all volunteers. Everyone, all town meeting members are volunteers. Well, with the exception of Ben. He's the paid town meeting member, but he doesn't vote. So please recognize them. And I call out again for folks who might want to serve on the advisory committee. There hasn't been a giant outpouring, shall we say. Getting into tonight, I think I'm going to change our approach to the budget. And what I was doing before is going through the departmental budgets one by one. We have a number of departmental budgets left, starting with 11 fire going through on the town side, 20 collective bargaining for the town. That's collective bargaining reserve. And what I think I'm going to do is just open the floor when we're ready. And you're free to come to the microphones and ask questions of any of the remaining departments. And we'll see if that goes any faster. We're going to have a debate when we hit the schools budget. So we're going to hold on the schools questions. We're going to be doing that separately. And I just want to say something about disclosures. We voted, a couple of years ago, that if you have a conflict when you're speaking, you should disclose the conflict and then go into your speech. And I just want to highlight that the fact that I believe that if you're employed by a union representing employees affected by the motion you're speaking to, that should be disclosed. And I just want to state that specifically. So with all that in mind, before I move on, I also want to recognize Ruth Ann Dobeck. And this is her, Ruth Ann. Ruth Ann is our long-term director of our senior center. She was there for the building of the senior center, for the startup of the senior center, and is loved by the senior community. And I'm told that this is going to be her last town meeting. So we wish her the best in her retirement, and we'll miss her in Brookline. The standing ovation, great. And I must say, in all my years in town meeting, I have never seen a standing ovation for a department head. So that's quite an honor. So let's do it. Let's get into the budgets for 11 through 20. That's fire, building, public works, library, health, veterans, council on aging, recreation, personnel services, and the collective bargaining reserve. And Ms. Zimmerman, is Ms. Zimmerman here? You had a question for DPW? Come on up to the microphone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Amanda Zimmerman, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7. I don't know how many folks in the room have walked across Cypress Field that we redid a few years ago, but I've been playing in an adult soccer league, and it has seen better days even at the start of seasons. And I wanted to ask this question. I actually asked this question similarly last year in hopes that there is something else that we could do to maintain the grass field in front of our high school in a way that reflects the respect that maybe the field in front of the high school should have. And if there's anything else that we can do to have it in better shape, to keep it from being a mud pit, other than trying to reduce the usage on it.
Sure. Thanks for the question. Alexandra Vecchio, Director of Parks and Open Space. So since its reopening and reconstruction in 2022, Cypress has received a lot of attention from our maintenance crews. So that's rigorous maintenance program, including seeding, aeration, organic fertilization. And this past winter, we added turf blankets, and those help us both increase the speed of the germination of the grass seedlings. And so you saw, hopefully, at this past spring that in the square where those blankets were, you saw a great deal of turf restoration that had occurred. But Cypress is a heavily programmed field. It's one of our few fields with lights, and it receives usage of over 1,000 programmed hours, not to mention passive use by neighbors and students every single day. So at this point, I would say that while we're committed to the ongoing maintenance, the conditions at Cypress field will always be a challenge for us, given that amount of usage. And so unless we're reducing usage or adding an extended rest season onto the field, it's just not realistic for us to expect drastic changes in the field conditions. But I say that we also have a shortage of fields in town. So the simple, answer is, oh, well, we'll just close that field and give it a resting period. It's not that easy when we have high user needs and a shortage of spaces for people to go. So I would say that given that the location of Cypress as the center point of the BHS campus and also just those high needs from all the user groups, it's not something we've been able to implement in terms of long-term rest.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the group? Mr. Lynn Jones.
Sean Lynn Jones, Precinct 1. If you look at the table, the budget table, the public works category includes administration, engineering, transportation, parks and open space, sanitation, and highway. Administration goes up 112.5% from fiscal 24 to fiscal 25, and all the other categories either remain about the same or go down. Now, Mr. Harris raised this when he wanted to talk about the new Sanitation and Natural Resources Division. And other people have asked me, well, what exactly is going on? Why is Parks and Open Space being cut? I think there's an explanation, and I hope that Commissioner Shute can tell us exactly what's happening in the DPW budget.
Thank you, Erin Chute, Commissioner of Public Works. What we've done this year is we've taken the item for fleet, which has historically been sort of passed across all of the divisions and sub-elements, and then put them under administration so that it's easier to see how the budget changes each year. So in the past, you would have budgets in highway, maintenance equipment, school grounds, parks changing pretty significantly just because the small and large engine equipment numbers change significantly year to year. So we're putting those all under administration. It'll be really clear for everyone to see going forward what's being spent on fleet across our entire department. And so you see some changes this year, but it'll mean, I think, easier way to evaluate the budget going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ananian?
This is a question for transportation. And it's from a constituent. Can you address the large backlog of traffic calming requests? A resident told me they were informed they were 27th in the list of traffic calming requests, and we only do 2 a year, which looks like a 13-year backlog to me. And how does this affect public safety? Thanks.
And you are Mr. Ananian?
Oh, sorry, Scott Ananian, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 10.
Hi there, Amy Ingalls, Transportation Administrator. So yes, we do have a backlog of traffic calming requests that have been there for a number of years. The reality is that the current policy requires us to do quite a lot of legwork in the beginning once we get a request to even prove that a study is worthwhile. I could go through the details of those points if you'd like. But all of those requirements, both before we decide a study is required and the study itself, plus the public meetings and the Transportation Board vote, all of that takes a lot of time and staff effort. And because of that, we really can only do maybe 1 or 2 a year. That's kind of been the way that things have played out in recent years. And so we see that that's obviously a problem. We're getting more requests faster than we can actually process them. So one thing that we are working on right now is trying to rewrite the policy to both acknowledge the requests that are there and and use some of the existing data that we have rather than collecting new data to prioritize them and identify the ones that have the greatest need, but also to look at the town comprehensively and use those same data sets to identify places where maybe there wasn't a request. Having a request-based system just kind of inherently leaves out maybe some places where people don't have the social capital or the time or the knowledge or whatever to make those requests, but actually still have the need.
So if you've got over a decade of backlog right now, do you have a plan or a projected timeline? What is your goal for how many requests you do a year or when you would get through the current backlog?
Yeah, so we did complete one last year on Beverly Road and Woodland Road. At this point, because we are kind of in the process of redoing the policy, we just had our first conversation with the Transportation Board about that in April. We aren't going to pursue any new projects using the old policy right now, just because we think that the new policy will help expedite things so much more. So we're focusing on that right now. And then once we do, I have a plan to basically analyze all of the requests that are there and prioritize them based on the data I mentioned, but also prioritize them based on when they came in, when they were requested, I should say, and implement them, in that kind of ranked fashion.
Are you still thinking 2 a year, or I just wondering for a ballpark number?
That's hard to say. Some of that will depend on funding and how the data plays out. We're still working on the analysis, so it's hard
Thank
to
you.
really say that.
Thanks.
Mr. Harris?
Yes, thank you. John Harris, Town Meeting, Precinct 8. And this is not a question. It's really a comment and actually a compliment. Brookline has already had in the 6 years or so, 5-6 years that we've had a slot for a sustainability director. We've gone through 2 sustainability directors already. And I am delighted that a successful applicant for our 3rd sustainability director has been part of town government for several years now. And in addition to having a very strong pro-climate concern academic background and expression of interest, she knows what it's like that town meeting and every single Brookline resident, at times we get cranky, at times we get pushy, and we're going to push and pull you in 1,000 different directions. But on behalf of Climate Action Brookline, I would hope we would extend a very warm welcome to our new sustainability director, Alexandra Vecchio. Thank you.
And we are never pushy. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Tommy Rankus, Precinct 13, Town Meeting Member. I have a question about the street rehabilitation project. I was just wondering if that would also include rehabilitating bicycle facilities that are on any targeted streets? And if so, if that would also include bringing them up to current design standards reflected throughout the town, such as the green paint we've seen installed in some places.
Ms. Shute?
Aaron Chute, Commissioner of Public Works. We have separate buckets in our CIP for traffic calming, for bicycle accommodations, for sidewalk work, and for roadway rehabilitation. We also have some discrete projects that you'll see, like the intersection work at Hammond and Woodland, which is and a road diet, multimodal improvements, and also Washington Street. But in every roadway rehabilitation project that we do, we are not necessarily improving or adding bike facilities to those. So we're looking at conditions assessment, we're doing ramps at intersections, but some of our work is asset management.
Sorry, just a little bit of clarity. So if bicycle facilities are already present and the street is being rehabilitated, the bicycle facilities will be left out of that rehabilitation?
If there are bike facilities and
Already
we're
present on the street.
already present and we're renovating the road, they would be renovated with the road.
Great,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Lebovitz?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Alec Lebovitz, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. And I have a question I'd like to pose to the Recreation Department. First, for a little context, many in the room will remember that a little less than 2 years ago, Town Meeting overwhelmingly passed a resolution calling for the completion of a feasibility study for an outdoor pool complex. I want to thank the Recreation Department for working collaboratively this year with the advisory committee to ensure that money was available for this feasibility study in the revolving fund for the coming fiscal year. So my question is simply, is there any update on what the process or timeline might look like for the conducting of the feasibility study this year?
Is that Mr. Davis?
Good evening. Tim Davis, Recreation Director. Timeline is to be determined. We are finishing up our study on Lars Anderson Rink right now. The pool is next on our list. So once we wrap up this one study, we will move ahead with the pool.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I see no more questions, and we've gone through the town departments for a total of 95,108,188. Now to the schools budget. The schools budget is being proposed by the advisory committee at $136,847,619. There is a motion to increase it by $1,079,213 for a new total of $137,926,912. That motion is offered by Bob Miller. It's seconded by Ms. Stahl. The motion is on page Supplement 2, Article 10, Supplement 2, page 1. And for this, we're going to have a debate. And I call on Mr. Miller. For a total of 6 minutes. And I remind all speakers that we should have appropriate disclosures. They have a slide presentation? All right. Who sent it? Ted Lewis.
Sorry, I don't have any good jokes to tell as we await the slideshow to come up.
Your time has started.
Hi, my name is Ted Lewis. I'm a bargaining specialist for the Massachusetts Teachers Association, but perhaps more importantly, I'm the parent of 2 Brookline High School students who benefited from the World Language Program when they were peer students. Next slide. And there's 2 things I want to impress upon you. After reviewing the town of Brookline's financial data, 2 conclusions became inevitable to me. 1, we do not overspend on education in Brookline and should not be making cuts. And 2, we can well afford the World Language Program. On an apples to apples basis, Brookline spends a smaller portion of its overall budget on its schools than other area towns. Next slide. And the idea that our education spending, our spending on schools is unsustainable is just not true. In fact, look at the increases to our schools budget. And as you can see, each year it lags behind the increase in our overall expenditures. Next slide. And people have asked me, well, where is the money going to come from to restore the World Language Program? It will come from funds that we are going to have, but have not yet accounted for. How do I know we are going to have it? Because we are projecting that we are going to have $10 million generated from local receipts. We're projecting we're going to have $10 million less next year than we actually generated last year. The money is going to be there, and I would bet you dollars to donuts that even though this year is not finished, we have already generated more than the amount we're projecting for next year. Next slide. And I put the following question to you. Why are we looking at cuts to education at all? Cuts to education should be the last resort when expenditures exceed revenues, not the first resort to maximize our reserves, as is the case here. Next slide. So I want to impress upon you, there's been a lot of fear mongering about our AAA bond rating. It is not in danger. We are an economically vibrant town. We have a solid economic foundation, and it is very rare for a town to lose its AAA bond rating. And I put it to you. See if you have access to the internet. See if you could find a similar town anywhere in the United States that lost its AAA bond rating. So you have a choice to make. You can either vote to increase our reserves and our surplus by $1 million, or you could vote to restore the funding for the World Language Program. I hope that you vote for your values and make the right choice. Thank you.
Hello, I am Bob Miller, town meeting member from Precinct 2, retired Brookline educator. Experts agree that language acquisition is the most effective the earlier it begins. We have a K-5 world language program today because the Brookline community told you that they wanted it when they voted to create it and to fund it with additional tax dollars. Our citizens highly value diversity, multiculturalism, and world connections. This program went away 2 months ago on a 5-4 vote. There hasn't been an adequate opportunity for the community to weigh in and recommit to this program. Are there areas of the world language program that must be improved? Yes, there are. Despite what some may tell you, there is evidence that this program has had success. Our best chance to correct and save this program is to preserve some of the jobs held by the experts who have devoted themselves to this program in this town. This amendment will not bring back all the program next year, but it will provide the foundation on which we can build the program the community asked for. Is there a risk that, unlike past years, we will fall short of our conservative revenue projections? Yes, there is. Is it possible that this could mean adding a smaller amount to our sufficient and growing reserves next year? Yes, there is. But if you vote this down, we know for certain that half of our children will no longer be receiving world language instruction next year, and possibly it will never come back. If you have heard that we don't control what the school committee does with the money, that's true. If elimination of part of the core curriculum for half of our students isn't a time to speak up, then when is? I respect the members of the school committee. I trust that they will honor the decision of this body. However, if the school committee decides to ignore the desires of town meeting and exclude the voters of Brookline and their clear desire for this program, then we have a bigger problem than world language. This is not a long-term solution. This is a one-time measure to allow the time for the community to bring back community to get into the process. It's not too late to save the foundations of this program. There are educators willing to stay and help us figure this out. Either way, the vote you're taking comes with a risk. On one hand, we risk smaller increases to our growing cash reserves. On the other hand, we risk losing a curriculum that the community, our constituents, voted for and that they may not get
Please
back.
conclude.
Thank you, I am. I ask you to do the right thing for the voters and the students of Brookline. Do not kill the K-5 world language program
conclude.
prematurely. Give the community a chance they
Please
deserve.
conclude.
I urge you to vote yes on this amendment.
Mr. Lu?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I am Andy Liu, Chair of the School Committee. The school committee hasn't had a meeting since this amendment was filed, so we haven't taken a position on it. I therefore can't speak for the school committee. I can only speak about the school committee to say that we had nothing to do with putting forward this amendment. We did not encourage it, and we have not expressed support for it.
We don't do that here at town meeting. If you do it again, I will have you escorted out.
The stated purpose of this amendment is to allow the school committee to fund K-5 world language for one more year at a level that many felt was inadequate to begin with. The staff whose positions were cut by the school committee have already been notified. The school department believes that even if funds became available now, it is highly unlikely, even impossible, that we could hire enough teachers at this point to staff the program fully next year. Looking further ahead, the amendment is intended to bridge the gap, to keep a program in being until we can put in place a reimagined one with fuller resources. Several school committee members have said that they would like to bring back the program with more resources in the future, if this can be done sustainably. Our administration believes that a redesigned program would not be ready for inclusion in the budget until, at the earliest, fiscal year 2027. This amendment, therefore, would not provide a bridge to a redesigned program that would not exist for 2 more years at least. So this past spring, the school department made hard choices in order to bring a budget to town meeting that's in line with our allocation as determined through the town school partnership. We intend to continue working through the town school partnership to ensure that all departments are funded in a sustainable and predictable way. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stahl?
Hi, my name is Wendy Stahl, Town Meeting Member Precinct 5. I'm also a mom to a kindergartner and a 3rd grader at Lincoln. We moved here 4 years ago and we're very excited about the schools. In-school instrument education in elementary school, foreign language in kindergarten, sign me up. My kids come home singing songs from their Spanish profe regularly. Hola, hola, buenos dias, hola, hola, ¿cómo estás? Because they love Spanish class. But it goes beyond catchy jingles. Not a day goes by when my 3rd grader doesn't attempt to speak in Spanish, showing off what she's learned. It's become a real part of her, and I'm so proud. There is a consultant's report on the status of the World Language Program in Brookline. It lays out some of the struggles of the current program, as well as areas for improvement. You know, my kids also get reports with suggestions for how they can improve. And when they're struggling, I encourage them to find the strength to keep practicing. But that's not what we're doing here with the World Language Program. Instead of adopting the recommendations of the report, we're calling it quits. Brookline shouldn't be making cuts to education, period. We need to push back on this. We can't make it easy to scrap educational programs. What's next? Dropping music because our students haven't proved to be good enough musicians by the time they get to middle school? I urge you not to set this precedent. I urge you to stick up for our educational programming, stick up for our children, my kids, your kids, stick up for their teachers. Support continuing the world language education of our youth so they can become the very best versions of their growing selves. The same way we support music and art and everything else that a well-rounded public education provides. And it seems like we're dropping this program as a result of financial pressure when maybe we don't need to, because it looks like our financial reserves are actually quite healthy and increasing. It's our job as elected representatives to provide a check on whether we need to increase our reserves to this degree. If the amendment does pass, the school committee would be in a tough position to still choose to entirely scrap a program that was approved on a town-wide ballot. They may choose to do that, but we shouldn't make it easy. I think we need to stand up for the values we truly espouse. Introducing language and culture exposure at an early age for my 3rd grader has been transformative. Let's have our budget represent our values. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Salmon.
Good evening, Mike Sandman, Select Board. Speaking for the Select Board, full disclosure, I am not the employee of the Massachusetts Teachers Association. There are 4 things wrong with the motion to invent $1,079,213 in new revenue and direct the funds be used to revive the K-5 World Languages program. The schools evaluated the program and found that students who took a foreign language in their early years were no more fluent in that language in high school than students who didn't start until the 6th grade. Funding would need to be more than doubled to do better. And the money would have to come from cutting something else because the budget doesn't stretch like a rubber band. Even if you vote the $1 million, the school committee is not going to recreate a program that would be underfinanced, and they don't have the money to fully fund it. And by state law, we cannot tell the school committee how to spend their funds. Based on prior year revenue from parking meters, building permits, and hotel and restaurant taxes, the amendment assumes that we underestimate those local receipts. True, they were much higher in the past 2 years than was forecast. The variances come from a one-time payment by public utilities following their unsuccessful challenge of their real estate tax bill, and from an unusually high building permit fee for the large senior housing project on Fisher Ave. Those are one-time windfalls. We can't just conjure up another $1 million windfall for fiscal year 25. We're prohibited by state law from having an unbalanced budget, and to spend more, we need more revenue. Telling you that we can invent new revenue is misleading and irresponsible. We could raise the money through a tax override, and please raise your hands if you think the voters are ready for that. We're one of 15 towns and cities in the state with a AAA bond rating. There were 16, but Acton lost it in 2021. We pay the lowest possible interest on what we borrow, mostly to build schools. If we had to pay just 1% more on the Pierce school bonds, it would cost us about $1.6 million just in the first year, and that higher interest rate would continue for the entire life of the bonds. Our AAA rating is very important. Is it at risk? The bond rating agency has told us that to keep it, we need to increase our reserves from 10% of annual revenue to 20%, because COVID showed rating agencies that an unanticipated event could cause municipal revenue to drop sharply, and ours did, and expenses to jump, and they did. So we need to catch up on reserves, and we allocated $1 million to start that catch-up. That leaves no stretch in our budgetary rubber band. Last, the amendment was filed by a respected town meeting member, a friend, a fellow cyclist, and fellow Red Sox fan. But the impetus comes from the Massachusetts Teachers Association. The MTA has promoted exactly the same sort of last-minute budget-busting amendments in Andover, Swampscott, and Marblehead. It's an attempt to appeal over the heads of elected school committees and select boards to people who want to support the schools. Don't be fooled. This is part of a state union initiative that has nothing to do with the K-5 World Languages program. The schools received 60% of our total funds, and they worked within that 60% for FY25, which wasn't easy. Don't blind us up for an unplanned override. A unanimous select board asks you to vote no on the Miller Amendment.
Marissa, vote.
All right. Hi, my name is Marissa Vogt. I am a town meeting member in precinct 6, and I'm a parent to a Pierce first grader and also to a student in pre-K at Beep. Every single parent that I've spoken to over the past few months, and there have been many, have been just incredibly frustrated by the decision to cut world language. And they all ask me, what can we do to advocate for more money for the school budget? It's clear from past overrides that there is also tremendous broad community support for world language and for our school budget. So the fact that the current school budget cuts world language just speaks to how dysfunctional our current budget process is. Our budget should not be blindly set by a static town-school partnership formula. The budget belongs to town meeting. So let's do our job and give the school budget the resources it needs to meet our community expectations. It's my honor to introduce some 4th graders from the Driscoll School who couldn't come back tonight. They were here last night, but they recorded this video message.
Students taking Chinese at Driscoll.
And we are hopeful and confident that K-5 world language can be saved by you.
I feel that it is important to study another language because it helps your brain grow, inspires you to learn new things, and expands your view of the world.
Learning world languages is a great opportunity for children to learn more about other countries and appreciate their language and cultures.
I am proud to say that I already speak Korean and love learning Chinese at Driscoll. Some data shows that if you speak 2 languages, you are less likely to have memory problems as an adult, and you are probably a better multitasker. A Boston-based study discovered that children should start learning a second language by or before 10 years old to be as fluent as a native speaker. If we lose K-5 world language, we might have a harder time becoming fluent in a new language by the time we get to middle school.
K-5 world language is something that makes Brookline schools unique. There aren't many school districts that offer K-5 world language, and that's what should stay in Brookline. Our city is so diverse, and having K-5 world language helps celebrate that diversity.
If you want to put E-grade on that. I'm going to E-grade, I'm going to conclude.
Okay.
Do you have E-grade?
Second video.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ari. And I'm Alice. We are both 8th graders at the Driscoll School and have been taking Chinese for 9 years.
Since kindergarten, Chinese has been a big part of my experience at Driscoll. From books to songs to lots of Lunar New Year celebrations, we've gotten to experience the culture of China in many ways.
As Masha said before, the Brookline School District is very unique. Many people are shocked when I tell them I've been learning Chinese for 9 years. We're lucky to have this opportunity, and we should be expanding it, not taking it away.
Next year, Ari, myself, and most of the students in our Chinese class are signed to take Chinese 3 honors at the high school. This class is only available for Driscoll 9th graders who have taken Mandarin since kindergarten, as well as older high school students.
My older sister and many of her Driscoll peers are soon to be BHS graduates. They took Chinese from kindergarten all the way to their junior year of high school. They were able to take AP Chinese their junior year, and without the foundation of Chinese from kindergarten through 5th grade, they wouldn't have been able to take the AP so early.
Chinese, a world language, is so special to us in our community, and we sincerely hope it can continue to be so important for the new students to come.
Hello, my name is Hannah, a Korean 14-year-old that also goes to Driscoll. Living as a Korean that was born in and is living in Brookline, I've seen many people in similar circumstances as me forget the Korean language as they grow up. The similarities I have noticed is that if Korean is not taught when a child is young, it is hard for them to grow up and speak fluent Korean, just like Ria mentioned before. There are so many things I can appreciate due to the fact that my parents invested the energy to keep my Korean at a young age. Therefore, I can tell you with confidence that language is not a mere form of communication. It does not only provide a way to communicate with a larger scope of people, but it opens up a door for a wider range of opportunities and forms of enjoyment related to the culture for the future of that student. Thank you for supporting this program until now.
Hello, my name is Kimberly Loscalzo. I'm a town meeting member in precinct 10. I have a 5th grader and a kindergartner at the Driscoll School, and I'm also the PTO co-president there. I'm reading the open letter that was created yesterday that garnered almost 400 signatures in less than 30 hours. Dear members of the school committee and town meeting, we, the undersigned school parents, students, town meeting members, and school voters wish to express our support for the world language program, and we urge the school committee to take steps to promptly restore language instruction for our children in grades K-5. Brookline's Pioneer Chinese program at Driscoll began in 2000 due to the efforts of the principal Carol Schraft and the Driscoll School community and the Freeman Foundation. The school-wide elementary world language program began in 2009, incorporating the community. For over 2 decades, these programs were given our children an important head start in language learning, increasing their scores in grade 9 ACTF proficiency benchmarks and normalizing and celebrating second language proficiency. At schools like Driscoll, the language program is a key part of our school culture, anchoring community celebrations such as our Lunar New Year. We are proud to be the proud and groundbreaking traditions of early childhood learning language has been put in jeopardy by the school committee's decision to eliminate K-5 world language program at the Brookline schools. On a personal note, the Lunar New Year celebration is my personal favorite assembly, and it's Driscoll's only assembly, which involves every single child, where the world language teachers take the time to have each and every grade perform a song or a performance or a dance. It's heartbreaking to think that this year was our last time we were going to be able to have that wonderful Lunar New Year celebration. And also the 4th graders got 542 signatures on their petition.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Moderator, can I ask you
We have
about a
another speaker,
point of personal privilege?
and that is?
I don't know if it is or not, but can I respond to Mr. Sandman's claim that I was motivated by the MTA to put forward my article?
No. No, that's not what he said. And
It is what he said. He said that he
Well,
likes me personally.
state your point of.
All I want to say is I had no influence from the Mass Teachers Association. Mr. Lewis was somebody who I reached out to because of his budgetary knowledge. This was completely motivated by my disappointment at the loss of a program in the schools of Brookline. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, Cliff Brown. Here's a slide.
Cliff Brown, Advisory Committee Member at Large, Chair of the School Subcommittee, speaking on behalf of a unanimous advisory committee. The school committee, informed by the district's new strategic plan and outside evaluations of programs and issues, made some difficult choices this year. The approach taken by senior leadership and the school committee was public, transparent, deliberate, and rigorous. It deserves to be respected. The petitioner's analyses are misleading. Sadly, time only permits me to focus on 1 or 2 items. Brookline budgets based on projected revenue, which is exactly what you are doing here tonight. Brookline has non-discretionary costs like debt service, pension fund obligations, OPEB obligations, employee health insurance, and payments to the MBTA in Norfolk County that must be accounted for prior to allocating money elsewhere. Expenses as a percentage of revenue after dealing with non-discretionary expenses is the correct way to evaluate the allocations that town meeting votes on. But the petitioner looks at expenses as a percentage of expenses before deducting non-discretionary costs. That is the wrong slide. Okay. This slide shows both the petitioner's approach on top and the correct approach using data from the source he cites. In both examples, prior to deducting the non-discretionary items, Brookline does show a lower share of the school's allocation to the schools than others. After appropriately deducting those non-discretionary items, Brookline ranks fourth in the petitioner's approach and third in the correct approach. Neither version includes the more than $6 million of operating revenue allocated to departments, including the building and IT departments, for payment of school operating expenses. If added, Brookline would rank third in both analyses and allocates a higher percentage of its revenue to the schools than does Newton, Wellesley, and Belmont. Though the article does not specifically state where money should come from in his write-up, the petitioner alludes to taking it from reserves. Reserves are used to deal with emergency situations, such as the expected deficit the public schools of Brookline will have this year. Those are meant to be one-time expenditures. Deploying reserves as suggested by the petitioner would use one-time money for ongoing operating expenses without identifying a source of revenue to maintain those operations. That is counter to basic sound fiscal management. Second slide, please. The petitioner's comments about reserves and ratings are cavalier, and it is notable he makes no comparisons to other municipalities. As the town grows and both its budget and its balance sheet grow, the need for reserves increases commensurately. This chart lists the 15 municipalities rated AAA by Moody's and their rankings on the criteria that make up the Moody's scorecard. Note the first two columns. Yes, we have a AAA rating, but when evaluated strictly on the criteria in the Moody's scorecard, we rank 15th out of 15. We are the only municipality that does not achieve either a AAA or the next best AA rating, AA1 rating on the scorecard. Why? Because we rank last, next to last, or in the bottom third on criteria accounting for 60% of the scorecard total. This is similar to what the Brookline Fiscal Advisory Committee identified and reported in 2019. We have a AAA rating. For now, because the scorecard is not the only evaluation tool Moody uses, but our scores are sobering. A AAA rating is a precious commodity, which if lost, is very hard to get back. And if lost, would have repercussions that go far beyond a higher cost of borrowing. By a vote of 22-0 with no abstentions, the advisory committee recommends no action on the petitioner's motion. Thank you.
Mr. Ellis, Jeffrey Ellis. And on deck is Mr. Buono.
Hi. My history is I went through the Driscoll schools before K through, Jeffrey Ellis, and my history is I'm a parent and a former student of the Driscoll schools and the BHS. And I could just tell you how much the culture has improved with the introduction of what was, it was 7 to 12 and the introduction of K to 6 at the time. So when I was at Driscoll school, if you looked different, if you didn't look cool, and so if there was immigrants and they didn't speak the language and they didn't know how to, they didn't dress like other people, and the thing was, there wasn't, so like on my first day of school, the Chinese boy was in the class, and he had, no one wanted to acknowledge him, to be with him, because he didn't look cool, and it was hard to, and that persisted, and that was common, and if you were, there wasn't this integration of people learning to get interested in each other and get interested in language and culture, and so there was, so there's, it makes such a difference, and I know a lot of us, we show up somewhere and we expect that, you know, people will accept us for who we are, and there's not going to be this barrier that people aren't interested in us. But to get kids, even like kids with liberal parents, to get kids interested in other kids, the studies, the ACTFL says, you have to expose them to language and culture young. And so it really makes a difference. And like if you talk to parents or come here from different countries, and that's why explicitly in the comments, like people come here for that. And it makes our tax base and our property worth more. And Moody's looks at that. I mean, I'm also a financial guy. I've studied and read all the Moody's reports. And the tax base is 20% of Moody's. And if we don't invest in these programs that people are coming to our community for, then we become less attractive. And like, I would not pull my kid out of a Driscoll school with this community, even for an amazing private school, because of that culture. But if we lose that, and then people have to put kids in private school because they want their kids to be challenged and to be pushed in math and pushed and be all that they can be. If we lose that, then our homes, the property base, so if there's a long-term thing. And I think I would encourage people to vote with what they think. Do they think cutting this K-5 program is going to make it better? And if you look at the data through the 9th grade, the program works.
Please conclude.
And you can reach out to me. And the finances, there's
Please
conservatism, and then there's the pandemic happened, and we've been anchored everybody
Please
to that. And if so, your thing is we don't have the money, please come and talk
Please
to me, and I'll walk
conclude.
you through it. Thank you.
Mr. I hear a call for the question. I think I'll take that motion. Okay, I called Mr. Buono. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. Hold on, let me. Yeah, I have slide on that.
I try to throw my own language puns up there. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Buono, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 17. Before my remarks, I want to give a quick overview of my background. I hold an MA in Mathematics and Statistics from Boston University. I have experience as a credit analyst in an investment bank, and I currently work as a data management consultant. With that said, I have serious concerns with the proposed amendment, as it contains numerous misunderstandings of credit ratings and municipal finance generally. Let me address the petitioner's claim that reducing our cash reserves won't endanger Brookline's AAA bond rating. They reference a paper titled Factors Affecting a Municipality's Bond Rating to support their argument. However, their interpretation fails for two main reasons. Next slide, please. First, according to Moody's most recent credit report for Brookline released in February 2024, the primary credit challenge listed on the front page is below average available reserves as a percentage of revenue for the rating category. Next slide, please. This directly impacts our credit health, as the availability fund balance ratio, which constitutes 20% of our overall credit score. This is the Moody credit scorecard that the other speaker was mentioning, is currently the weakest link of all of our financial indicators. It is the one that is A, it's our lowest financial indicator. Next slide, please. Secondly, the paper cited by the petitioner actually contradicts their own argument. The researchers identified 5 key factors that influence a municipality's bond rating: earnings per worker, assessed value per capita, level of outstanding debt, unemployment rate, and critically for our purposes, the ratio of tax revenues to expenditures. The last factor, the tax revenue to expenditure ratio, not only has a statistically significant impact, but also the largest coefficient magnitude in the study, indicating that it is the most crucial factor. Hence, a reduction in our cash reserves, which adversely affects this ratio, is likely to have the most significant negative impact on our credit rating. Having established the vital importance of maintaining robust cash reserves for a healthy credit rating, I will now address the petitioner's oversight in assessing our current free cash position, further illustrating the potential risks of their proposal. Next slide, please. The petitioner correctly points out that we have $25.1 million in certified free cash in 2025, but omits the fact that $22.4 million of that was already allocated. We did that last night. After allocating an additional $1 million, which we did on our first night, to the Employee Vacation Payout Fund, through warrant Article 9, only $1.7 million remains unallocated, not the $25 million that the petitioner wrote in his amendment. Next slide, please. The remaining $1.7 million is crucial for next year's budget stability. The surplus we've experienced this year stems from unusually high investment returns and one-time return of fees. These are the fees that Mr. Sandman was talking about from the public utility and the permit fees. This is not going to occur in 2026 or beyond. This will not come again. Predicting more typical future conditions, as seen by the shaded line there, Brookline free cash will likely return to a more historically consistent level, relying on this year's abnormal surplus for our operating budget would be a grave fiscal oversight. We have not always had this much free cash, as shown in the graph above. In 1991 and 1992, when that free cash was negative, we did not have a AAA bond rating. We should not treat our bond rating as a constant that our petitioners have, and our free cash amount as a constant, which it will not be. To conclude, the petitioner's article repeatedly misinterprets key facts of municipal finance, making their proposal unsuitable for Brookline's future needs. Our town demands sustainable, long-term financial strategies, not a rushed $1 million amendment filed just over a week ago at the last possible moment. I support a world language program, and I look forward to the schools bringing it back in 2027 or beyond. But funding it in this way is misguided. And because of that, I will be voting against the amendment. I encourage you all to do the same. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm not going to entertain the motion yet. Mr. Birnbaum has been very patiently waiting. He submitted the fact that he wanted to ask a question yesterday on this topic, so I'll let him ask his question. And hopefully it'll be a little more productive than his last question yesterday.
That was uncalled for. I had a legitimate question for the police department. I'm sorry, I'm a bit appalled by that comment, really out of nowhere. But I'll ask the question that I prepared and signed up quite early to ask. I actually have one for each side of this debate. First, it's been said that shifting these funds to the school means cuts elsewhere due to the requirements for a balanced budget. I get that. However, from a cut from the reserve fund, I think is a bit harder to envision the implications of. So how much comes out of the reserve fund in a typical year? What is the effective cut that we would see in this scenario? Like, what are we voting to lose out on if we vote for the amendment? And I'll wait for that answer and ask my other one.
Mr. Carey?
Chas Carey, Brookline Town Administrator. Thank you for that question. I think it may be necessary to give a little explanation here. I believe, and the petitioners can correct me if I'm wrong, that what they are asking in submitting this amendment with no offset in revenue is that we reproject revenue rather than cut from reserves. The job of projecting revenue is my job. It is actually one of the only jobs that I directly have under the Town Administrator Enabling Act. And there's a reason for that. It is to prevent situations where revenue is over projected to finance projects and then have that revenue not materialize. When the Town Administrator Act was drafted, the purpose of that was to gate revenues behind a level of protection so that there would be a limit on that front. And so in response to this question, what would we cut? We wouldn't cut reserves, and we would not increase our revenue projection for the reasons that have been stated by the other members who have spoken here today. It would be a poor fiscal decision, and we would pay for it elsewhere, particularly with regards to our bond rating. What we would cut, I don't know. This amendment came too late. $1 million is a lot of money. I do not know where we would find the funds for that. Mr. Sandman suggested one potential option would be to put an override on the ballot in the fall. That is one option. But realistically, I can't ask town departments to be pitted against the school department. I can't say to DPW or the police or fire, I'm going to cut your budget by $1 million. That's a very bitter pill to swallow. So we would need to think long and hard in the event, because we could not cut reserves. Reserves are one-time funds, and we would not increase revenue projections.
Mr.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I still had more there. So I just want to be clear. It sounded like the answer there was it's not a cut from the reserves, it's a cut from an unknown entity right now.
That was the answer, yes.
Okay. My question for the advisory committee, based on what I heard in their introductory budget speech and the specific call out about the appropriateness of, quote, last minute amendments and the implied appropriateness of amendments at any time, in what scenario does the advisory committee think it is appropriate for the town meeting to amend the budget, if any? Beyond satisfying the legislative requirement that town meeting approve the budget, what value does the advisory committee see in having any budget discussion or debate at town meeting at all?
I don't think we'll answer that question. Mr. Trejo.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Carlos Vidruejo, Precinct 14. My colleague Cliff Brown just mentioned that there will be a deficit in the school budget for this fiscal year that is finishing up now. I think it would be good for this discussion to learn a little bit more about that, the size of that deficit and where the money to pay for that deficit will come from. Thank you.
Was that a question?
Linus Guillory, Superintendent of Schools. Dr. Gibbons, are you on to answer that question? So in generally, Mr. Rodrejo's question, our expenses, if you've been following the school budget at all this year, and even into last year, we've been talking about increases in inflationary costs, but more specifically, we've seen an increase in cost towards our out-of-district placement as well as our transportation costs. So primarily in our Department of Special Education Services, which are required services for us to provide for students. So that's the primary driver for that. But Dr. Gibbons, if you're able to add a little bit more context to that.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Several weeks ago, we presented a financial report that suggested that we could be as much as $1.7 million over our budget this year. At that time, I reported that there was additional work that needed to take place in order for us to evaluate where we may have additional ways to reduce that deficit, including review of our special revenue funds to make sure that all of our staff were properly allocated, as well as to go through all of our purchase orders and any additional spending that we may have to incur before the end of the year. So since that time, we have been able to do some additional work in those areas, and the deficit is below $1 million at this point, and we still have some more work to do. We'll be giving an updated financial report on Monday, and I will be able to share more details at that time.
Okay. I'm going to take the question. I'm going to take the call for the question.
Could I make a point of order, sir? I believe Alyssa Connor was on the speaker list. Who's a teacher from the public schools of Brooklyn.
Yes.
Okay. I was just not sure whether she was skipped over.
No. She's a non-town meeting member, so she is a lower priority.
I believe I'm also on the speaker list.
Yes, you are.
Okay. I'll let you.
I'll read the folks who are on the list. Nancy Daly, Scott Ananian, Elisa Connor, then the folks at the microphones, and I see Marty Rosenthal has a question. So with that, we have a call for the question. Second. Oh, it's second. I heard a second. And so let's do a vote. Article 10, Miller Amendment, call for the question. terminate debate.
Yeah, 155 yes, 74 no, 7 abstentions.
So the motion passes 155, 74 and 7. I have a little bit of a dilemma. We took a motion to terminate the debate on the Miller motion, which raises the school budget, but we never had general questions on the school budget. I know someone has signed up for general questions. So I'll allow that question and then we'll vote for the school budget. Since point of order, Mr. Rosenthal.
Did I finally get the unmute? I'm sorry.
Please go ahead, Mr. Rosenthal.
Yeah, thanks. So my question was about the school budget, but actually on the the last vote, but I think it applies to the school budget. I think the school committee was irresponsible in not addressing the Miller amendment issue. And I'm
point of order.
I'm sorry?
That's not a point of order.
Well, the point is that I think we should hear from them where that 1 million would go. And I'm hearing that they're not going to spend it on world language and it'll just become money down the drain from other town departments. And I think we should hear from them on that.
Okay. We have another point of order. Before I entertain the point of order, I've been informed that I can take the question after we do the vote. So let's do the vote, and I'm seeing nods from the lawyers, and then I'll take the question.
The question was relevant to the matter here. The general question on the budget that I had.
The question's been called, the debate has been terminated. You submitted the question in advance. I'll honor that, but we're going to do the vote. Okay, so right. So we're voting on whether to accept the Miller Amendment. So the Miller Amendment increases the school budget by $1,079,238 to a new total of $137,926,912. So a yes accepts the Miller Amendment. A no we already voted to terminate debate. Yes, Mr. Salmon.
Point of order, Mike Salmon, Select Board. Pardon me, sir, but I believe that it increases the school budget and it correspondingly increases revenue.
No, it doesn't increase revenue because we have no authority as town meeting to increase revenue. So it throws the budget out of balance by $1 million.
Thank you.
And we would have to bring the budget into balance in November. So that's the dilemma we have. So a yes vote increases the school budget by a little over $1 million. A no vote leaves it with the advisory committee motion with a balanced budget. Motion fails. 67 yes. I will repeat the vote. The motion failed. Actually, I didn't say the vote, so I have nothing to repeat yet. So I'm saying it for the first time. The motion fails. 67 yes, 163 no, 7 abstentions. So, Mr. Tough.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mike Toffel, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. I support the schools having an excellent K-5 world language program. And my question is, how much will that cost? And will it require lengthening the school day?
And I'll apologize, Mr. Toffel, for not recognizing you during the debate.
Linus Guillory, Superintendent of Schools. Thank you, Mr. Toffel, for that question. We've done some back of the napkin math, taking into account what we would really like to do to make our world language program more robust, giving teachers the adequate time and space within our school day to actually deliver what we would consider a world-class K-12 education in the languages. And so I've asked Dr. Fortuna and Dr. Gibbons have worked together to give some very crude numbers. So I don't want you to hold us to that because we have much more work to do on it, but to give you an idea of the magnitude of what it would take to really take us to that next level. And I will signal that it will include looking at a lengthening of a school day as a possibility. So I'll let Dr. Fortuna give a little more detail there.
Jody Fortuna, Deputy Superintendent in Teaching and Learning. There are 5 areas that we would have to increase in order to create the world language program that we want for our students. We would have to add teaching staff at a total of somewhere between $1.6 and $2 million. We'd have to add back some administrative staff at a total between $75,000 and $100,000. Our health insurance for the added positions would be about $277,000 to lengthen the school day between 15 to 30 minutes. That would cost between $3 million and $6 million, and supplies and materials would cost between $250,000 and $400,000. And if you're adding those up, that is a range of $5 to $8.7 million.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, so for the length of the school day, what's happening right now is with our program, we don't have sufficient time to teach world language to our students. And so in order to build that time in so that students can have 5 days a week in 6th grade, this would be 5 days a week actually for all grade levels. To create a more robust program, we would have to lengthen the school day so that we would still have time to do things with literacy and social studies and science. We've added a new grade 8 civics test for MCAS this year, which is new. So our history and social studies education has become a tested subject in the state of Massachusetts, and we want our students to continue to excel and do well.
Thank you.
Oh, and of course, that would all be subject to collective bargaining and with our union partners.
Thank you. For real this time.
Sorry.
Okay, so we've completed the school budget, and after the vocational educational assessments, we have completed all of our departmental expenditures for a total of $231,970,807. We now move on to non-departmental expenditures for a total of $135,277,809, and that includes a number of categories such as employee benefits, the reserve fund, stabilization fund, affordable housing, liability cash, catastrophe fund, general insurance, audit professional services, contingency fund, printing of warrants and reports, and MMA dues, Mass Municipal Association, for subtotal of $9,781,685. We add to that our borrowing costs, debt and interest of $135,277,809. Those are fixed costs, for total general appropriations of $367,248,616. We went through all of the special appropriations yesterday, and we switched around between items 48 and 69, but the total remained the same, $22,270,465, for total appropriated expenditures of $389,519,081. Add in the non-appropriated expenditures. These are expenses that town meeting has no authority, no ability to change, so we're out of luck. I'll just highlight one, the state and county charges for $7 million, which is, well, that's, the county charge is a subset of that, built into that, but we're one of the few counties that do that, but we have no control. For a grand total of $399,507,324, and that is the number that we will be voting on to appropriate. So I think we're ready for an omnibus budget vote. Oh, we vote on the 389? The number we're voting on is the appropriated expenditures, 389,519,051. That's the right number. 081. 389,519,081 that we've spent the last two nights building our motion to get there. Let her drop. And the motion passes 228, 8 no, 3 abstentions. We now have given the town the authority to spend a little over $389 million. Congratulations. Okay, we're ready for the next article. I thought I'd never say that. And the next article is Article 11, the CPA, the Community Preservation Act. And let me just say a couple of words about the CPA and what we're going to be doing. This is the first year that we're considering expenditures from funds from the CPA, Community Preservation Act accounts. And town meeting has limited authority of what we can do. The CPA committee, who you're going to hear from, Nancy Heller was the chair, has been working hard to craft a proposal, the proposal you see before you. And there's 11 different projects that are going to be described. And there are currently there are three motions the first motion, which is on page, get my cheat sheet. So the main motion is moved by Ms. Heller, seconded by Mr. Green. It's begins on page 11.2 and goes through page 11.6. There is then a motion to divide the question from Mr. Vitolo, who moves it and is seconded by Mr. Gordon. And you'll be hearing more about that motion to divide. So you're going to have a choice of voting as an omnibus motion or project by project. And you're going to have that choice after you hear the debate and you decide how you want to vote. And that was the purpose of the motion to divide, to give you that choice. There, built into the CPA article are three motions. The first is an allocation of funds coming in this year to the various reserve accounts. 10% of the funds must be spent for each community preservation, community housing, and open space and recreation. So 10% each, and the remainder will go into a general reserve. So we have 10%, 10%, 10%, and then a general reserve. And then the second motion is an administrative motion, and there's a lot of administration, as you're going to hear, with the CPA. And then the third motion, and the third motion is what would be divided if that motion to divide is passed, where you would be able to vote project by project. So with that, I'm going to turn it over, as soon as I can, to Ms. Heller. And I will be adjusting the clock here. So you can start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I don't think that time is right, is it? It says 6 minutes.
No, that's
right.
not right. I'm
Okay.
working on getting it.
All right. Thank you. Nancy Heller, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8, and Chair of the Community Preservation Act Committee, also called CPAC. I'm going to be joined by Steve Heiken and Sam Burrington, who are both members of the CPAC, and they'll come up in a few minutes. And Lindsay Butler, our CPA staff, is also available to provide assistance. We're recommending the town meeting approve the funding of 11 grants. And I'm only going to be talking about the 11 and not the fiscal year 25 appropriation, which is money we don't actually have yet. It will come in fiscal 25, but that's more of a pro forma kind of motion. So we are recommending the town meeting approve the funding of 11 grants for a total of $7,931,765. Could you turn to the next, next slide too. Neil covered that and he covered this one. So next slide, please. All right. All right. This slide is shows you the allowable uses of CPA funds. And I won't bore you with all of the details. That can be kind of complicated. But one notable feature is that CPA allows support in the housing category only, as you will see later in our presentation. Next slide, please. I've often described CPA as a grant program with strings. Most of these strings are eligibility requirements that must be met before a grant can be funded. One of the most important of the strings is that projects involving real property, whether for housing, open space and recreation, or historic preservation, require deed restrictions which protect the property and the CPA investment. Other restrictions, so studies lead to eligible projects. CPF funds cannot replace already appropriated municipal funds. Each category may have its own restrictions. Next slide, please. Furthermore, CPA doesn't employ municipal staff. I'm sorry for the poor fellow who's in the little photo there. And CPA funds cannot be used for ordinary repair and maintenance, nor used for support, except in the housing category. Next slide. Grant funds are only dispersed to applicants after they have submitted an invoice with documentation of eligible grant expenses. If there are unexpended grant funds, those remain with CPA and can be allocated the next year. Next slide, please. I'd like to welcome Steve Hyken. He's a member of the CPAC appointed by the HAB, and he's going to discuss the 5 affordable housing projects that we're recommending.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Welcome to the job.
Thank you.
Good evening, town meeting members. I'm Steve Hyken. I am the Planning Board's designee to the Housing Advisory Board and the Housing Advisory Board's designee to the CPA Committee. And I'm here to review the 5 projects in the housing category that we've recommended grants for a total of $6,441,535. The largest of them is to begin the redevelopment of the Brookline Housing Authority's Walnut High redevelopment. It's a 100-unit development in Brookline Village. The first phase would replace 32 of those 100 units, which are a mix of family and elderly, with 100 new units at a total cost of $75 million. The CPA Committee is recommending a grant of $3,750,000, which would be matched by an equal amount from the Housing Trust Fund administered by the Housing Advisory Board. Together, that would be about 10% of that $75 million budget, but it will help leverage a significant amount of additional state and federal funding. And, you know, those units are all for low-income public housing residents. That's by far the largest of the housing grants, more than half of the total amount. A second grant to the Brookline Housing Authority is to initiate the replacement of the roofs at the Egmont Street Family Housing Project in North Brookline. That consists of 6 buildings, 20 units each. Sorry, yes. Next slide. Thank you. 6 buildings of 20 units each. The first phase would replace the roofs on 2 of those buildings. We're recommending a budget funding of $500,000 for that project. That will also be matched by other funds from the state. And the remaining 4 buildings will be replaced in subsequent phases. A third project, the remaining 3 projects are all grants, proposed grants to the Brookline Community Development Corporation. The first of which, next slide, is for housing assistance. And as Nancy mentioned, support in the housing program is one area where CPA funds can be used. I would mention that as a member of the Housing Advisory Board, we've typically given funds for preservation and development of affordable housing, but support, rental support and assistance is another little used function of the Housing Advisory Board that we intend to look into. But as far as the CPA is concerned, we're proposing a grant of $232,375, which would provide assistance for landlords who are suffering because their tenants are in arrears, to the tenants themselves who are in arrears. It will also fund consulting and education services to tenants and landlords regarding landlord and tenant rights and responsibilities, homeless prevention, and financial planning and good rental practices. This grant will comply with strict regulations in the CPA community housing category. And the town is actually working on an RFP for providers of similar services down the road. This is kind of a stopgap measure to get these funds going. And the graphic you see there, this is the Brookline Community Foundation's Understanding Brookline 2.0 report. It's a demographic study. I'm a trustee of the BCF, and the 25% you see there is the number of Brookline residents who are struggling to make ends meet. Over 30% of Brookline residents are housing burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. So this is the beginning of a program to help them. 2 more housing preservation projects. Next slide, please. That's 154, 156 Boylston Street. This is a 6-unit family housing development for which CPAC is recommending a grant of $1,192,439 to do envelope preservation, window and exterior siding repair to prevent ongoing moisture penetration and to keep this housing safe. And it's part of a larger program funded by other sources to preserve this building. It'd be supplemented by both ARPA and CDBG funds. And finally, BCDC has a 100-year-old 15-unit single-room occupancy building on Beacon Street, for which we're proposing a similar grant of $766,721, again, to do preservation of the envelope to prevent water damage, including envelope work, thermal and moisture protection, and replacement of the fire prevention system. And that will also be supplemented by ARPA funds. So those are the housing projects, again, with a total of $6,441,000 and change. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Now Sam Burrington from the CPAC is going to speak to you about open space projects.
Sure. You don't need to see all of me. I'm Sam Burrington. I'm a member of the Conservation Commission and the Community Preservation Act Committee. So I'll give you a brief overview of the 4 open space and recreation projects. The first of these is the Lars Anderson Park Historical and Cultural Landscape Report. And this will be funded in part from the Reserve Fund for historical preservation and in part by the Reserve Fund for open space and recreation. And this report will be a comprehensive study of the site's history and historic features, a conditions assessment plan, and the evaluation of the integrity and significance of the site elements and features. And the report will sort of enable the utilization of the $3,300,000 amount that was voted on for appropriation to conduct renovations and improvements at Lars Anderson last night, I believe. I was not here. So the second project is the Halls Pond invasive species removal. It's essentially a pilot project to test a relatively new method for removal of invasive species, which are a significant problem at Halls Pond. The amount requested is $3,500, and the money will be used for the purchase of tarps to remove invasive plants. No chemicals will be used, and it is thought to be more effective than manual extraction of the plants. And let's see, the third project is a tree inventory. This was submitted by the Parks and Open Space Division. The amount requested was $328,030. The project aims to protect and preserve our tree canopy and hopefully expand it. Our tree canopy, as you may know, is currently in decline for various reasons. The tree inventory will be conducted at Lars Anderson Park, Fisher Hill Reservoir Park, Brookline Reservoir Park, Emerson Garden, Mason Square, and Nivet Square. And the project will involve assessing the caliber, size of the trees, assessing what types of trees we have, assessing what trees are in decline or need to be removed for the safety of people using these parks. And the information will allow the town to develop a plan for removal of dead and declining trees, pruning of healthy trees, and subsequent planting of new trees. And some of the money will also go toward beginning these efforts at Lars Anderson Park in particular. And the fourth and final project, which was submitted by the Department of Public Health, is for the creation of a pocket park on the, I guess we would call it the Public Health Plaza off of Harvard Street, right in Brookline Village. It's sort of the denuded stretch of grass you may pass by when you're walking down Harvard Street. And the project would create a small passive park in an urban neighborhood, as stated, and would involve planting of new trees and addition of seating features for those patronizing adjacent businesses or just wanting to take a break and enjoy the surroundings. So thank you.
Thank you, Sam. We'll move on now to historic preservation, and I'm going to make this presentation on these grants because we recently lost John Spires, who was our preservation appointee from the Preservation Commission, and Arisa Boyd has been nominated in his place. However, she's not had an opportunity to attend a meeting or been involved in a discussion, so I thought it was kind of unfair to her to ask her to come to the podium. Oops, this is falling. So the first project, as you can see, there are three projects. One is actually already been discussed by Sam. It's the Lars Anderson project that's split 50-50 between open space and historic preservation. The Devotion House, would you put up the next slide, please?
We'll sing.
Oops. I'm sorry, did I miss the church? How could that happen? Okay, I missed the church, sorry. All Saints Parish roof of $800,000 is what we are recommending. This is an historic church, a very historic church. It's listed on the National Register of Historic Places, the Massachusetts Register of Historic Places, and located within the Beacon Street Historic District. It's been designed by famous architects. The funding is for $800,000 for a roof project only at the corner of Beacon and Dean. Our funding represents less than 27% of a $3 million or a little more project to preserve the exterior of this historic building. Because the roof has significant leaks, the building is in danger of harm. The church building, as I said, is very historic, and its status and value as an historic resource in Brookline is our primary reason for this funding recommendation. Our secondary reason is that this church has had at least 50 years of welcoming many, many community groups to share its space, including the Co-op Nursery School, which is a full-time program, several music groups, including Boston Symphony, and many, many recovery groups, AA and Overeaters Anonymous, etc. The willingness of the church to make space available to an incredibly wide variety of community groups is a valued benefit to Brookline residents. The grant is completely secular. We are not funding any religious items. Furthermore, historic churches as community organizations cannot be denied public funds as long as the grant meets CPA eligibility requirements and the separation of church and state is respected. We cannot single out churches in denying them the secular benefits that other community organizations are eligible for. Next slide, please. Devotion House, I'm sure you're all familiar with it, is in dire need of window preservation. Listed on the Massachusetts Register of Historic Places, it is a town-owned building and home of the Brookline Historical Society. Our grant funding of $65,000 will be augmented by $29,000 going for the casements. Our money will go for the windows themselves. These are the funds, the $29,000 are funds earmarked from the Devotion Ridley project. The town has been unable to fund the windows from its CIP and therefore can be funded by CPA. Next slide, please. And this is the project that was previously described by Sam, and the funding is split between the buckets. So I'll just remind you of that. Next slide, please. When CPA opened its doors for grant requests, the initial number was over 16 million, with housing requests leading the pack with 12.5 million. We dived into particular requests. The proposed grants were reduced in number to the categories you see here. The reason varied. A few grantees withdrew, some secured partial funding from additional sources, Some were ineligible for CPA funding for reasons that I explained earlier. So the CPAC is pleased to recommend to you projects that have been vetted by us, and the numbers for those are in bold, and projects that will enhance community life in Brookline. The CPAC recognizes that from year to year, we may have an uneven distribution of funding because of projects submitted to us. We do not initiate projects, we only accept the ones that have been submitted to us. It is our hope that our funding will even out over a few years period. We are confident that we are funding projects that meet community needs and welcome more projects in the coming years. Next slide, please. Last slide. Please vote favorable action on 11 grant appropriations recommended by the CPAC for a total grant appropriation of $7,931,765. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Ms. Levin. And can we fix the podium?
Hi, I feel like I need to apologize for being up here again. But believe it or not, I couldn't find anyone else on the Capital Subcommittee.
And you are?
Oh, I'm sorry. Carol Levin, at-large member of the Advisory Committee, Chair of the Capital Subcommittee. And as I said, after having 12 subcommittee hearings just on the CIP, multiple hearings on the Department of Public Works budget, and then on the Building Commission budget, and having all these advisory committee meetings in a 8-week period, I think you all deserve the subcommittee, the Capital Subcommittee, Alok Samani, Carlos Rodriguez, Pam Lodish, John Doggett, Harry Friedman, all deserve a big round of thanks for working so hard. And because of that busy schedule, and this year, the first year's schedule for the CPA, we did not do the deep dive that you saw that we like to do on other projects. So this is going to be very brief. The AC did meet, the advisory committee did meet on May 23rd, and we had a brief discussion about the motion to divide the question, and we were in support of that for two reasons. One, we thought that it would be important for people to have a chance to discuss the individual projects. And we voted, after passing that motion, we did vote on each individual project, and they were all voted in support of. At an earlier meeting of the AC, we did discuss the relationship between CPA projects and the town CIP plan. And we do strongly encourage that in the future, CPA proposals adhere to the same planning and review schedule as the CIP projects. This is so the town meeting can be presented with an integrated set of project proposals, regardless of whether the projects are funded by free cash, bonds, or CPA reserves. Other neighboring communities with many, many years of experience with the CPA use this approach and find it very useful and successful. Regarding the discussion of individual projects, there were some concerns about funds being appropriated for the roof repair at All Saints Parish Church. Those questions were around the reasonableness of using public funds to help repair privately owned building, and they were just compounded by questions regarding the mixed religious and secular uses. And a motion to reduce this appropriation failed. So in conclusion, the AC voted to support in full as proposed all of the CPA special appropriations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bernard Green, Chair of the Select Board. So a lot of what I was going to say has already been said, so I won't repeat it. And thank you. Okay. Brookline finally adopted the Community Preservation Act in May of 2021. And I recall back in 2006, when I first got on the select board, this issue was before us and we were arguing about it. And it took that long to actually get this passed. The total amount that the CPA committee, we began receiving money from the 1% local property tax in fiscal year 2022, plus a state match, which varies, and accumulated interest earnings. That gives us a fund, the CPA fund, that we can use to appropriate to various purposes that have been discussed that were discussed earlier. The total amount that the CPA committee is asking town meeting to appropriate, as I think Nancy mentioned, is $7,931,765 for the 11 projects that they mentioned, plus other appropriations for an unallocated budget reserve account of $3,372,500, which will be further appropriated sometime in the future at the town meeting, and also money for administrative expenses of $177,500. Town meeting has the following options by majority vote. 1, to appropriate from CPA resources the recommended projects. 2, to deny the recommended projects. 3, to appropriate the recommendation at a reduced level, but town meeting cannot increase any project or move money from one to the other or suggest new recommendations. Town meeting also apparently tonight has the option of dividing the question instead of voting for it in an omnibus fashion by voting a motion filed by State Representative Tommy Vitolo, a member at large of the town meeting. That motion proposes to vote the administrative items, administrative items as one item and have separate votes for each of the 11 distinct items for separate projects. The motion's explanation states that the reason is to allow town meeting to communicate its preferences to the CPA committee, communicate its preferences to potential applicants in the future, and communicate town meeting members' votes to the residents of Brookline. Town meeting members' specific votes per project. The select board reviewed the recommendation of the Community Preservation Act Committee in April and did not have any proposed adjustments. The select board voted 4-0 with one member absent for favorable action on the motion offered by the CPA committee. On May 28, after Representative Vitolo's motion was filed, the select board recommended and voted favorable action on the motion to the motion as modified by the Vitolo motion, based on representations from the representative that the petitioners were okay with splitting the article. So we voted unanimously 5-0 on May 28th in favor of that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I neglected to, thank you, Mr. Green. I neglected to tell everybody where the Vitolo motion is, and it's on the Article 11, Supplement 1, Page 1, I don't even know what the pink, razzmatazz. Okay. Okay, next up is Jocelyn Murphy. Do I see Jocelyn? Oh, she's online. We're going to take a few more speakers before questions. Okay. You're on, Jocelyn.
Hello, Mr. Moderator. I did not request to speak, so I'm not sure where that came from.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Shawnlyn Jones. I don't know where that came from either. I probably misfiled between articles. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Shawnlyn Jones, town meeting member from Precinct 1.
and president of the Brookline Green Space Alliance. First, I want to say that it's just wonderful that town meeting is finally able to vote to appropriate CPA funds. A lot of people, including quite a few members of the Green Space Alliance, spent many, many years, as Chairman Green pointed out, trying to persuade Brookline to adopt the CPA, and it finally happened in May 2021. So regardless of how town meeting votes on the CPA recommended appropriations, it's fantastic that we have the opportunity to finally decide how to spend CPA revenue. There was some big news out of a New York City courtroom today, but we're making some news tonight in voting for the first time with on CPA appropriations. Now, I also want to thank the members of the CPA committee for their hard work and the hard work of their staff. I attended a lot of their meetings, so I know the process was time-consuming and challenging, maybe a bit more time-consuming and challenging than they expected when they signed up. This, of course, has been the first time that we've appropriated CPA funds, and it's fair to say that a lot of lessons were learned in that experience. And I hope that the members who are willing to continue to serve on the committee will apply the lessons they've learned as we start to consider applications for CPA funds for the coming year. And that process is beginning soon. As president of the Green Space Alliance, I'm going to focus on the open space and recreation recommendations. I'm not making any recommendations on the motion to divide the question or the projects in the housing and preservation categories. I do hope, regardless of how the vote is structured, in the end, you'll all vote to support the open space and recreation appropriations, numbers 13, 14, 15, and 16. Others have explained them. Thank you, Sam Burrington, and made the case. I'll just make a few comments. These offer excellent value for money. For a relatively small expenditure, we're making a major contribution to the urban forest climate resiliency master plan through the tree inventory. And it's great that the health department is stepping up and creating a pocket park. But I want to single out the Friends of Hall's Pond for praise. It was really hard for small grassroots organizations to navigate the application process, but the Friends were not intimidated, and I hope that their application will inspire similar groups to apply for CPA funds. Next year, the Green Space Alliance hopes that there are more applications in the open space and recreation category because we need more parks and more opportunities for passive and active recreation. And we hope that there will be more applications, and the time to start thinking about them is now. Please vote in favor of the CPA committee's recommended appropriations for open space and recreation, numbers 13, 14, 15, and 16. Thank you very much.
Mr. Vitolo, okay, I see you, Mr. Ananian and Mr. Rubenstein. I'll call on you after a few more speakers.
I remain State Representative Tommy Vitolo, town meeting member at large. Building a plane as you fly it with an incomplete set of parts and inadequate time is no easy task. Thank you to the CPA committee, especially Chair Nancy Heller. I speak tonight only on the motion to divide, not on the wisdom of funding or not funding any project. My hope is merely that you will be asked your opinion on each project. I began discussing dividing the question with the moderator and others when I became aware that we would otherwise have a single vote on these 11 discrete projects. My interest in dividing manifested weeks before any public conversation about any of the items. And indeed, before I had even read the details of the 11 items under consideration this evening. You have no doubt read the explanation of my motion found on the razzmatazz colored page from the supplemental mailer. It is a real Crayola color, only available in the 96 pack and larger. It's true. A divided question wherein we, town meeting, vote each project separately allows us, town meeting, to communicate our preferences to the CPA committee, both as a whole town meeting and as individuals. A divided question wherein town meeting votes each project separately allows town meeting to communicate its preferences to potential applicants. A divided question wherein town meeting votes each project separately allows town meeting to communicate its votes to Brookline's residents via transparent recorded votes. Stuart Saganor, the executive director of the Community Preservation Coalition, states that, quote, small and medium-sized towns often have a separate article for each project. In larger towns with lots of projects each year, the projects are often grouped together on the chart in one article. But in either case, the moderator should call for a separate vote on each project, end quote. However you feel about each of the 11 projects, I hope that you recognize that a divided question allows more opinion to be expressed, more information gathered. I ask that you join a unanimous advisory committee and a unanimous select board in voting favorable action on the motion to divide the question.
Thank you. Mr. Jack, I believe he's remote, David Jack. And he has 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. My name is Dave Jack, and I am the current chairman of the Brookline Preservation Commission. While I'm not officially speaking on behalf of the commission tonight, I'd like to share with the town meeting members reasons I believe the Brookline Preservation Commission voted to unanimously support the application for roof repair at All Saints Parish at 1773 Beacon Street. The commissioners agreed that All Saints Parish was architecturally significant in terms of its style and in its association with a significant architect. The building was designed approximately 130 years ago by Boston architect Ralph Adams Cram, a man whose design career influenced a generation of American architects working in the collegiate Gothic style. Mr. Cram was also responsible for shaping the early 20th century campus designs at Princeton University and the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. The Preservation Commissioners also recognize the important contribution the design of All Saints Parish performs as a listed building included in the Beacon Street National Register Historic District. The commissioners reviewed the applicant's presentation package and studied photographs documenting the deteriorating roof conditions that have resulted in water infiltrating the existing structure. The commissioners agreed with the applicant's argument that further deterioration could undermine the building's structural integrity if left unchecked. Preservation commissioners also reviewed the project scope and project costs for re-roofing the structure. The commissioners agreed that the anticipated costs for installing a new roof were in line with similar roofing projects of this scale. The commissioners acknowledged the private and religious use of All Saints Parish, but I believe the Preservation commissioners recognize the many essential services the building provides to the greater Brookline community, including housing a preschool, providing a performance venue for numerous choral and instrument ensembles, hosting 5 substance abuse support groups on a weekly basis, and serving as an emergency site for the Runkle Public School. To conclude, I hope town meeting members will agree with the Brookline Community Preservation Act Committee, the Brookline Select Board, and the Brookline Preservation Commission, and vote to provide funding for the repair to the roof at All Saints Parish. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Klein. And I think after Mr. Klein, we'll take a few questions. Then we'll continue down the speaker list. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jonathan Klein, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 17. I'm also a member of the Housing Advisory Board. and I'm also a member of Brookline for Everyone. I speak only for myself. I am speaking against the motion to divide. I am speaking for the Community Preservation Act Committee recommendations, all of them. And especially I want to speak about the housing recommendations. So on the motion to divide, with respect to my good friend Tommy Vitolo, there has been a process that has been in place for a long time, nearly a year, hard work done by the applicants, working with the CPA committee and doing their applications. None of the applicants, I believe, expected that they needed to lobby town meeting members to get their applications approved. They worked through the process. I believe that the CPA committee did a really excellent job. I personally attended by Zoom many of those meetings and watched how thoroughly they vetted the applications. And I am in favor of honoring the work of that committee and accepting their recommendations. That said, and I support all of the, if it is divided, I will support each and every one of their recommendations. And if it is divided, I want to speak especially in favor of the housing recommendations. First of all, the two recommendations for funding the Brookline Housing Authority are very, very important. They are an enormous resource to our community. They've done wonderful work. The Walnut High project will provide amazing housing for very low income individuals, and our money, which is being matched by the HAB from the Housing Trust, will go a long way toward getting that project off the ground. I also want to speak about the allocations, the proposed allocations to the Brookline Community Development Corporation. There are three. Two go to each of their two projects, the one on Boylston Street and the one on Beacon Street, both of which are badly in need of repair, and one goes for the Housing Stability Fund. With regard to the two projects, I think that the BCDC, which is under new leadership, this is a 40-year-old organization. It has a revitalized board. It has a strategic plan. It has been working very hard over the last several years to, quote, get its act together to apply for funding. These projects serve many of our most vulnerable citizens. They are in bad repair. It is an embarrassment that they are not in the condition that they need to be to provide decent, safe, sanitary housing. And I think it is an important act for the town to take to support their good work in assembling this funding and other funding, which will help revitalize those projects and make them the kind of housing that we as Brookline residents and town meeting members can be proud of for our most vulnerable citizens. I am also in support, and I'm aware I'm almost out of time, of the Housing Stability Fund, which again provides funds for our most vulnerable citizens who are at risk of eviction. It will help with providing people who are housing challenged to meet those challenges, to get the counseling they need, to get emergency loans, to get small one-time grants. And I think the Brookline CDC has done an excellent job putting together a proposal for that. I support that, and I support all their good work. I hope you will vote for all of the recommendations of the CPA committee and thank them for their excellent work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Ananian? A question?
Yes. So Scott Ananian, town meeting member, precinct 10. I would like to briefly speak against the motion to divide, but I will happily cede that time to if you all have other people signed up for that specific topic.
I have lots of other.
The specific question I'd like to ask is, do you as moderator have an estimate of how much longer it will take to vote each question individually? And will we have the opportunity to debate each item individually?
No.
Or no?
This is a consolidated debate and figure 2 minutes each. So there'd be 12 votes. So it'd be 25-ish minutes.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Rubenstein.
Michael Rubenstein, town meeting member, precinct 13. Mr. Moderator, I wonder if you or anyone else could speak to both the process and the outcome for the appropriations from the fiscal 25 expected annual revenue. You had stated earlier that there were 3 10% allocations for open space and recreation reserve, historic preservation reserve, and community housing reserve. However, the numbers that are listed in the combined report indicate that the allocations in each of those areas is $67,750 over the 10% of the total appropriations. So I'm wondering whether you or anyone can speak to the process that led to that and the outcome.
It won't be me. It'll be Ms. Heller. Thank you for bailing me out. I was just reading the numbers from the page.
So the CPA, for fiscal year 25, as I said before, is money that we have not yet received and is estimated to be the amounts that you see in the chart. The overall amount is about $3.5 million from the 1% surcharge on property tax, the hopefully as large as possible state match, and the interest. But those, the tax rate's not been set yet. The state match has not been finalized exactly. We don't know exactly what the interest will be. So these are estimated amounts. But it's very important for us to make sure that we don't underestimate the 10% categories. So we overestimate them in order to protect ourselves from a problem later on. In other words, if our revenue forecast of 3.5 million is not quite accurate, it's lower than we end up getting, we want to make sure that we've allocated at least 10% of whatever revenue we do get into the different categories. So that's why the number is a little higher.
And
Thank
you
you.
were, Ms. Heller, who were you?
I'm still Nancy Heller, still town meeting member, precinct 8, and chair of
Okay.
the CPAC. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Buono.
I don't have a question per se. I could phrase my comment as a question if that'll get me to.
I have people signed up for comments.
Then I'll just ask my question. That's okay.
Very brief.
Yes. So I want to ask a question to the CPAC committee about how you
who are you?
organized.
Mr. Buono.
Yeah.
Who are you?
Oh, my name is Anthony Buono, town meeting member, precinct 17. My question is for the CPAC committee. I'm wondering what they did to get input from the town. I specifically am interested about how they got input for each of the developments that are listed. I want to know what the public hearings were like and the large survey that they conducted across town-wide to get information about what the town desired to be in the CPAC funding.
Can you answer that briefly?
Before we engaged in the grant application process, we went through approximately a year of community engagement process, which ended in the development of our CPA plan. You can find it at brooklinema.gov. Put CPA plan in the search bar and you'll get it. It's a very lengthy plan. It discusses CPA eligibility requirements, et cetera. And that was based on, we had 3 focus groups, a charrette at the high school, an open house here in the Tappan building. And we also did a survey. We had 800 respondents. And from those respondents, we ranked the answers. The people who were most interested in open space came out a little bit ahead of housing. And then they came out a little bit ahead of historic preservation, and that's reflected in the plan.
So do you believe, oh, sorry.
All of our meetings are public and on Zoom. Anyone could attend, and many people did. And we got public input from those people about the various grants. So we did conduct a very open process.
So do you believe that the CPAC committee did a very efficient job of capturing the town's desires when developing the entire plan as it is?
Yes, I do. As I said before, the reason that the particular housing recommendations are so much more than the other categories is because we took in applications. Some of the applications, for instance, in both in all 3 categories actually, were unable to be funded for various reasons that I explained earlier. And so we were left with the 11 projects that we funded. We are recommending funding for now. And so that's why there's a skewed amount, but I'm hoping in the next few years that we will be able to even that out over time.
Thank you. Ms. Thal.
Carolyn Thal, precinct 16. So this is the appropriate time to ask specific questions about specific items. Okay, great. Thank you. So I just wanted to ask sort of a multi-part question about the LARS item, which I understand to be money for a plan and report, which sounds great. So one, I understand there was also an application about LARS from residents that was not accepted. So I'm wondering where the application that was accepted for LARS came from. I don't know who made that application. And then I think, I'm not sure if it was.
Can I just answer that one
Sure,
first?
yeah.
Okay, so the project that we were able to fund was submitted by Parks and Open Space Division of the town. So it's a town project.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's what I thought. And then I think it was you, Nancy, in your explanation, although now with all the information, I'm not sure it was you, who said that some of what would be addressed would include or could include some of what we just voted for LARS in the $3 million for some work there. So I just wanted to understand.
Yes,
that
there
what we-
was a $3 million project. Is Aaron Shute here? Pardon? Oh, Alexandra.
And if I could just be clear with the question, which might not be clear. I guess I want to make sure that
That's not before us.
I want to make sure that what's proposed here is different than what we just voted.
That's a yes or a no.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
And then I guess I also would just there's a lot of conversation about LARS and the potential for a really big development there of a skating rink. So I guess I just would like some assurance that this, I'm looking at you, but it may not be directed.
And a skating rink is not before us.
Okay, I would like assurance that this item is a report and that it is aimed towards preservation of the historic park and not aimed towards sort of laying the groundwork for development.
And that's a yes or a no.
I believe it's a yes, but why doesn't Alexandra come up and say her piece?
Alexandra Vecchio, Director of Parks and Open Space. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Davis.
Jonathan Davis, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 17. This is a process question. I'm sorry. Does the CPAC look at the abilities of the applicants to raise money internally? And I'm thinking, for example, let me give you a hypothetical example. Supposing that there's a tax-exempt fraternal benefit association, which I think is tax-exempt under C6, and it happens to own, let's say, a historic building, and it's a membership organization. Does CPAC look at the ability of the applicant in a situation like that to raise money from members?
Is there a specific project here that you're?
Actually, there is, but I deliberately used a different kind of tax-exempt organization to try to remove, to try to make it sort of a purer question. But actually, yes, I mean, the church is definitely in that kind of category also, but that's why I wanted to choose a different exempt membership category.
We should ask questions about the specific projects and not.
Well, I can frame it if you like to specifically with respect to St. Paul's Church.
Yes, okay.
Nancy Heller again. Yes, we do ask questions of each applicant, all of the applicants, about their ability to secure funds from in other ways, either from their membership, if they are a community group, or if they're a town department, other grants, et cetera, that will match our funds, or at least will have some impact on reduction of our funds and use of ARPA, for instance, and CDBG in some of the projects that we have approved. Most of the projects with the exception probably of the invasive species removal. That one is fully funded by us. It's a $3,500 grant, a minimal amount, but the value of it is a volunteer labor to carry out the project. So that's a significant portion. But we do look for, in every single instance, we do look for ways that the organization is contributing to the project. In the instance of the church, as I said, this was we're only paying for 27% of this project. It's a $3 million project. The applicant, All Saints Parish Church, is holding a capital campaign, and they are also committed, if they don't raise enough money, to get a mortgage based on their endowment. And their endowment would pay for the mortgage costs. So yes, they are contributing a significant portion, more, almost 75% of the project will be owned by them.
Okay,
And
thank you.
in return for that, we will get a deed restriction, which will protect the property in perpetuity. It may already be protected according to the National Register, but we will make sure of that.
Okay,
Thank you.
this gentleman, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name, and I've received two motions to call the question, which I'll take after.
John Rumpler, Precinct 11. My question also is about this All Saints Parish project. Full disclosure, I've been there. It's beautiful space for concerts and so forth. Thank you for the committee's hard work. My question is this: it does occur to me this is the first time that we are giving funds to a privately owned property for historic preservation, and that part of the reason cited was the services that are provided to our community, which I fully support. So my question is simply a legal question: can there be a binding contract between the town and All Saints Parish to simply provide for those services to be provided in perpetuity, so that and I'm just mindful that this sets a precedent potentially for any future CPA thing on a private property. I want to make sure we're going down the right road for the future. Thanks. And this may be a legal question for town council. I don't know.
I'll let
Well,
you guys.
let me answer the question from the CPAC's perspective. Nancy Heller again. This is the first year we have had grant allocations under the CPA Act. And the CPA Act specifically speaks about municipal projects and community organization projects. It includes the whole community. Many churches in many communities have benefited. Historic churches, if it was a modern church, we wouldn't be involved. So as to your question about the community involvement, we will discuss that with them. They have had over 50-year history without our saying boo about what they should do in terms of the community. So I don't have any doubt that they're committed, thoroughly committed to community use. And it's huge, it's varied, and as you say, it's got beautiful acoustics, so the music is beautiful, and et cetera. So we will discuss it with them, because we will be entering into a grant agreement or a memo of understanding for each of the 11 projects. And that could be a topic of conversation.
Okay, I have 4 motions to call the question, and I will accept it. I hear a second. Okay, I'll hear from Mr. Gordon, an opposition speaker. Oh, no. No,
Call the question.
I will hear from Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Neil Gordon, I'm Precinct 1 Town Meeting member and a member of the Advisory Committee. Because it's there might be sufficient reason to climb a mountain, but it's not a reason to spend too much on old, tired, non-ADA compliant, heavily mortgaged properties. I ask you to vote no action on spending nearly $2 million on roof, window, and other repairs on Brookline Community Development's Boylston and Beacon Streets buildings. On the Boylston Street project, BCDC will spend $1.2 million, nearly $200,000 per unit, adding 0 new housing. Brookline Housing Authority is building 100 units of affordable housing at High and Walnut. Funded by CPA and the Housing Trust, they'll replace 32 obsolete housing units and add 68 units for $76,000 each. BCDC asked for nearly $800,000, $51,000 per unit, to repair a building with just 15 single rooms. While roof repairs on BHA's Egmont building, which housed 120 families, will cost per unit a fraction of that. I'm separately concerned with BCDC's fiscal health. Financial statements I discovered just a week ago show $1.7 million in balloon mortgages, half due next June. $300,000 more is due in 2027. An additional nearly $600,000 is owed to the town of Brookline, loaned interest-free. BCDC will likely renegotiate its debt, but tonight we can't know that outcome, and tomorrow we won't have a seat at the table. The proposed grants are too much for too little. Let's save that money for some other time, including perhaps in November, where we could take up the BCDC projects again, at the least knowing if BCDC has stabilized itself financially. We need substantially more affordable housing than the town can afford, and we need to spend limited resources wisely. BCDC is recommending no action on the motion to divide. Brookline for Everyone, whose board includes BCDC president and their treasurer, urge the same. Ask yourself why they might be opposed to your voting up or down on their grants. For transparency and so that we don't squander precious taxpayer funds, I ask you to please vote yes on the Vitola motion to divide, and please vote no on items 9 and 10. I thank you.
I think in all fairness, I need to call on Ms. Deborah Brown. And then I'll take a motion to call the question.
My name is Deborah Brown. I'm the board president for the Brookline Community Development Corporation. I'm on several boards, so if you want me to list them all. But into the mic, okay. Deborah Brown, I'm the board president for the Brookline Community Development Corporation. Mr. Moderator, select board members, town meeting members. I'm here to ask you to vote no on dividing the question and yes on the main motion. But, you know, I had a nice little speech prepared, but I think I'm going to spend the bulk of my time sort of talking about who we are and what we do. There's a gap in this town between the haves and the have-nots. And the have-nots in this town are relatively invisible. We're a small organization, but the services we provide, honestly, there's not a whole lot of folks out there doing it. Our properties are in repair, and I think we're flipping through them now. They're not places, I guess, anyone in this room lives in, or very few. I morally believe that anybody should have the opportunity to live in safe, sanitary housing with dignity. That's not free. Are these costs high? Yes. Did the committee grill us on that? Yes, 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 and yes again. We are asking to merely maintain this building. We have gone out, if I weren't here tonight, I'd be writing another proposal. We will find the matching funds. This project will not be paid solely with CPA funds. The CPA funds will enable us to leverage and identify other resources. I also want to say that during the process that we went through, we actually went out and the HAB said, you need a project manager. We got a project manager. For this project, we have an architect, engineers, cost estimator, and a contractor, just to make sure that we get it right. Then the work in our proposal was deeply vetted and evaluated extensively by even more experts. The work will begin in the fall. The work will be completed by next summer. Again, CPA is not the only money that we're going to have. We're out there looking and we're going to leverage other money. On the emergency assistance side, 116 people were filed against for non-payment of rent. We have upwards of 50 Brookline students who are unhoused. And for those of you all who are not familiar with the term unhoused, that means homeless.
Deborah, please conclude.
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Please. The question before you is our financial condition. I have the personal and the professional integrity never to show up and ask for money if I don't think we can manage it. We have the internal capacity to manage this project. The statements that have been made at best are erroneous and at worst compromise the very integrity of what we are trying to do. I also want to say that CPA is not a grant. If we don't do what the town tells us to do and the way they want us to do it, we don't get reimbursed. So it's not just a gimme. And finally, I want to add that we can't do this work without the CPA money. And this CPA money is intended to do exactly what we're asking for. Is it expensive? Yes. But the alternative is to have people on the street.
Okay, please conclude.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a motion to call the question from Wendy Friedman. Do I hear a second? On the speakers list, we have Mr. Homer, Mr. Toffel, James Drake, who's a non-resident who works with the Brookline Center, Colin Stokes, Stephanie Bruce, Ryan Ladd, Carlos Rios, Kimberly Richardson, and the folks at the microphone. Up. So there's a motion to, I misspoke on the mover of the motion. The mover is Gerald Tuckman. And do I hear a second? Okay. Sorry about that. And so, and add Wendy Friedman to the question queue. Drop the vote. This is the motion to terminate debate. Yes is to terminate debate. No, debate continues. Motion passes 193 yes, 33 no, 9 abstentions. So we're now moving to the voting. The first vote is the motion to divide the question, which is on the, Mr. Vitello proclaims razzmatazz supplement number 1, page 1. And it moves that the question be divided as follows. the reserve and the admin items. That's the first two votes in the motion on page 11, 2, and 3 would be voted together, and then the projects individually would then be voted. We would have a total of 12 votes if this motion passes.
Point of order.
Yes.
Please. There are several people whose machines are not properly working.
The
Uh, the-
IT
the-
staff in the back,
No, not there.
out in the hallway? They're in the hallway now. And if your machine isn't fixed on time, just let Mr. Kaufman know your vote. Okay, so the motion is, we're ready to vote on the motion to divide. Yes is to divide the vote, 12 votes. No is to vote as an omnibus. Ready to go. Motion fails, 104 yes, 131 no, 8 abstentions. So we will vote in an omnibus fashion. The motion is on pages 11-2 through 11-6, and it's it's 3 motions voted together. First motion is the allocation to the reserves. The second motion is for administration, and the third motion is for the projects that you've heard about. So yes is to approve the CPA allocations for fiscal 2025, and no is not to. Ready for the vote. Motion passes. 226 yes, 10 no, 7 abstentions. Get that? Okay, we're ready to move on to Article 14. That was the omnibus vote. All 3 motions together. We're ready to move on to Article 14. The main motion is on pages 1415 to 1418, and this concerns the reduction of setbacks for energy-saving devices. It's moved by Ms. Stahl. It's seconded by Mr. Pollock. This is a zoning amendment which requires a 2/3 vote. I will note up front that there are no speakers signed up against this. So I think this can move very quickly. And I'll also note that the next few articles, there's no opposition, so we should be able to move through them quickly. Okay, so we're ready to go on Article 14. What's up? Ms. Stahl.
My slides have sound, so could make sure to share sound as well. Thank you.
Hang on.
Okay, it says please conclude, but. I won't.
No. I'm resetting.
Thank you. I have 5 minutes also.
5, okay.
Thank you. I'll just start. I'm Wendy Stahl, Town Meeting Member Precinct 5 and the Chair of the Zero Emissions Advisory Board. Great. We worked closely with town staff in crafting this article, including town council, the building department, and particularly the planning department. Thank you. I don't know if they're still here, but thank you. Next slide. This article has been approved by every board that has seen it. Next slide. The state has a legally binding mandate of reducing our emissions by half in the next 6 years and reaching net zero emissions by 2050. The graphic here is from the state's 2050 Clean Energy and Climate Plan, and it shows the state's 4 key priorities for emissions reduction. The first is eliminating emissions from energy end uses, which means we need to transition all our cars and buildings off gasoline and natural gas and instead power them by electricity. Big policy changes need to happen at the state and national levels, but municipalities like Brookline can also make things easier. This warrant article is one example of that. It's a way we can make it easier for those living in our dense neighborhoods to accomplish priority 1 of this graphic. Next. Article 14 will allow for easier installation of electrification equipment like heat pumps and EV chargers in Brookline's densest neighborhoods by reducing the required setback from the lot line from 6 feet to 2 feet for all buildings except residential buildings of 7 units or more. Next. Currently, these are considered accessory structures and are not permitted to be installed within 6 feet of side or rear lot lines. If a property owner would like to install a heat pump closer than 6 feet, for example, if they have a very small yard, they must request a special permit and have a hearing in front of the planning board, followed by a hearing in front of the Board of Appeals. Next. But the special permit process is inequitable. Some well-informed homeowners who also have free time elect to navigate the process themselves, but the majority hire assistance. At the low end of costs, people can only pay $1,000 for a land survey. And on the high end, they can pay up to $10,000 for the additional services of an engineer, architect, or lawyer. And it takes 4 to 6 months. But it is only people who live in Brookline's denser neighborhoods that have to endure these additional burdens. To meet the climate mandate, we need every home to transition to heat pumps, even the homes with small yards. It's going to take dedicated work. But the way things are set up now, we're making a hard thing even harder. Next. Here are real examples in Brookline of what we're trying to make easier. These units can be fairly narrow and can be mounted on the ground, a wall, or even a roof. Next, we understand that people are concerned about noise. Modern multi-stage and variable stage heat pumps are quieter than the air conditioners we're used to hearing around Brookline. We are confident that few people will choose noisier heat pumps since Mass Save only provides financial incentives up to $10,000 for heat pumps that are multi-stage or variable stage. This is because the newer technology is not only quieter, but also more energy efficient and less expensive to operate. To get a sense of how quiet variable stage heat pumps are compared to single stage air conditioners, I have a video. Next slide.
These are our old air conditioners, and they're big and they're noisy. At this speed, they really sound like a fridge. You can hardly hear them.
Next slide. If the noise is louder than expected, we have safeguards in our noise control bylaw. It states that heat pumps must be no more than 10 decibels louder than background noise day and night. And if it makes a tonal sound like a hum or a buzz, it can't be more than 5 decibels above background noise. If an installation is non-compliant, the town can require that the unit be shut off until it is fixed to be in compliance. Next slide. I'd like to finish with the fact that we are not the first. Somerville, Newton, and Wellesley have done this, citing equity concerns and a desire to make climate action easier. And Brookline approved this change last year in the small residential district in the Harvard Street plan. Next slide. Since people have been concerned about noise, I reached out to these communities to see if there have been any noise complaints. All 3 of their building departments said that they were not aware of a single complaint. In other words, they have taken this for a test drive and proven that it's okay, and Brookline can feel confident in removing this barrier. Let's make it just a bit easier and more equitable so we can move quicker towards our goal of 0 emissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pollock.
David Pollock, town meeting member, precinct 11, and chair of the Advisory Committee Subcommittee on Land Use, Zoning, and Sustainability. So we heard some really exciting news last night from Planning Director Kara Bruton, not quite as exciting as the news on the radio at 4 o'clock this afternoon. But we heard that the entire zoning bylaw is now indexed on upcodes. So I had to check. And sure enough, 2 clicks. It took 2 clicks to get into our zoning bylaw to the first page, section 1.00 purpose. And for those of you who don't have the zoning bylaw on your bedside table for reading, I recommend just this first page, because mostly when we go to the zoning bylaw, we're looking for something very particular, but it is good to step back and look really at the purpose of zoning. Changing our zoning bylaw is one of the most consequential actions of town meeting. Zoning does a lot of things to promote the public health, safety, convenience, and welfare, including balancing the rights of individual property owners with the rights of everyone around them. These rights, enshrined in our federal and state constitutions, are given form in our local zoning. Some aspects of zoning regulate impacts that are wide-ranging and more diffuse. Article 14 proposes a change to the very intimate relation between abutters at the side and rear yard property lines. The advisory committee conducted 3 long discussions, really without any debate about the intent of this bylaw, which was strongly changed, which was strongly supported. The March 20th subcommittee hearing led to significant rewrites by the petitioner, the Zero Emissions Advisory Board, putting to rest many of our initial concerns. When the article was discussed at the full advisory committee on April 2nd, the main outstanding issue was about the size of equipment installations that should be allowed in the area from 2 feet to 6 feet from the property line without going through the special permit process. The potential negative acoustic as well as visual impact of large air source heat pump installations was a major concern of many AC members. A number of further limitations were considered and rejected by the AC, including setting size limits for equipment, excluding all commercial projects, multifamily projects of all sizes, multifamily projects of 5 or more units. The AC settled on just excluding multifamily projects of 7 or more units from the as-of-right allowance, considering that those larger projects should be required to apply for a special permit and present at a public hearing. ZAB agreed to accept the AC's amended motion, and so the advisory committee recommends favorable action on Article 14 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Van Scoyoc.
John Van Scoyoc speaking for a unanimous select board. Article 14 is a proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw that would allow for the installation of energy-saving equipment up to 2 feet from a side or rear lot line by right. Under current zoning, especially in denser neighborhoods, homeowners must apply for a special permit and bring their case to the planning board and the zoning board of appeals. This delay can add time and expense to a project, creating a barrier that should not exist. As noted in the planning board report, recent special permit cases indicate that relief has been granted for as close as 1 foot from the property line with no appeals from abutters. The select board agrees that there should be an easier path to support the conversion to renewable energy resources. So with thanks to the Zero Emissions Advisory Board, ZEAB, for bringing this article forward, a unanimous select board voted favorable action on the motion offered by the advisory committee.
Thank you. We'll hear from the planning board and then I'll accept the call for the question. It'll be quick. And you have a sense of the room, right?
Steve Hyken, this time for the planning board. I will be very brief. The planning board held its hearing just after the advisory board's hearing and concurred with the advisory board's recommendation to put that one limitation on this proposed warrant article that would require buildings of more than 6 units to still go through the special permit process. That's because we did not want to see clusters of these things on larger projects, and they mostly belong on the roof of larger projects in any case. So on April 4th at the planning board's hearing, we voted unanimously to recommend the approval of warrant article 14. Is that the number?
Yes,
Okay.
14.
That's it. Thank you.
And are you calling the question, Mr. Sam?
Yes, sir. I'm calling the question.
Okay. And I see a second from Mr. Lebovitz. So we're ready to vote to call the question. Oh, I'm sorry. Who's in the queue? Mr. Lowy, John Harris, Mr. Klein, Ms. Zimmerman, and Mr. Lecky, non-town meeting member. Okay, ready for a vote? This is a vote to call the question. Yes, terminates debate. No, we continue to hear people in favor. There might be a question. And I see there is a question at the microphone. Okay, the vote passes 204 yes, 18 no, 5 abstentions, right? Okay, so we're ready for the motion on Article 14, which is on pages 1415 to 1418 to reduce setbacks for energy saving devices. In the words of the motion, I think we're ready for a vote. A yes is to approve it. This needs 2/3. Passes 232 yes, 2 no, 4 abstentions. Motion carries. Article 15, which is staggered terms for constables. Motion made by Mr. Gordon, seconded by Mr. Dowdy. The main motion is on pages 15-7 to 15-9. Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Neil Gordon, Precinct 1 Town Meeting Member, member of the Advisory Committee, and one of 5 Brookline Constables. I'm speaking both as petitioner of Article 15, which proposes the bylaw establishing staggered terms for constables, and to save a bit of precious time for unanimous Advisory Committee recommending favorable action. Each year, Brookline elects 1 or 2 Select Board members, 3 members of the school committee, and 4 library trustees, in each case for 3-year terms. Our 5 constables, though, are elected all at once every 3rd year. Article 15 seeks to conform the election of constables to the same staggered model we use for every other elected body. There's no single compelling reason for this change, but there are a series of benefits that, in the aggregate, support staggered terms. First, simply having a constable on the ballot every year will increase voter awareness of what otherwise, for a townwide elected office, is relatively obscure. Obscure enough that constables aren't on the town org chart, and but for election results are not to be found on the town website. Next, the opportunity to run for townwide office. Presently, if you decide to run for constable, you may need to wait several years for your first opportunity. If you run and lose, incumbent or challenger, you'll wait 3 years before you can run again. With staggered terms, the opportunity to run presents itself every year. Lastly, Brookline has a long collaborative history of seasoned constables mentoring those who are newly elected. Joe Figler succeeded his father. Former Constable Tommy Vitolo was mentored by Marvin Feynman. Tommy, in turn, mentored me as I've mentored those subsequently elected. Staggered terms ensure that as new constables are elected, experienced constables remain in office. To migrate from the current model to a staggered one, I've proposed the same method we use to stagger town meeting members following redistricting. In the next election, presumably in May 2025, the top 2 finishers will serve for 3 years, the next 2 for 2 years, and the 5th place finisher for 1 year. Other than those needing to run again in 2026 or 2027, based on order of finish, I see little, if any, bias in favor of either incumbents or challengers. As noted, there's no single compelling reason for staggered terms, but there are a series of benefits in the aggregate support a change. The Advisory Committee and I ask for a vote of favorable action on Article 15, and I thank you.
Mr. Van Scoyac.
Once again, John Van Scoyac for a unanimous select board. Article 15 is a petitioned article which seeks to create a new section of the general bylaws establishing staggered terms for the office of constable. Town constables are currently elected every 3 years as one slate. This article seeks that the staggered terms of other boards, for example, 2 officials elected in year 1, 2 in year 2, and 1 in year 3, be applied as well to the office of town constable. According to the petitioner, from whom you just heard, one may have to wait several years to run for constable, and the proposed staggered terms provide an opportunity to run every year. The select board agreed that the proposal could improve the continuity of service for the position and provide a built-in mechanism for mentorship. A unanimous select board voted favorable action on the motion offered by the advisory committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There are no other speakers. So we're ready for a vote. So we're ready to vote the main motion, which is on pages 15-17 through 15-19. A yes is to approve the staggered terms of constables. A no is not to approve it. Ready? Go ahead. Let's do it. Motion's 15-7 to 15-9. I misquoted the pages, sorry.
Point of order.
Okay.
I believe the vote said Article 16, Mr. Moderator.
Yeah, he's resetting the vote. Yes, start over, please. And we have the right vote this, we have the right vote this time. Motion passes 213 yes, 3 no, 4 abstentions. We can move on to Article 16. This one should be fast too. The motion is on pages 16.8 through 16.9. It's moved by Mr. Penzel and seconded by Mr. Benka. Mr. Penzel. Second. Do you want to switch positions speaking? Want Mr. Van Scoyac to go first?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
quickly. This concerns the reduction of the Commission for Diversity, Inclusion, Community Relations membership.
And one more time, John Van Scoyac for a unanimous select board. Article 16 is a proposed bylaw amendment that sets the number of seats on the Commission for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Relations at 9 rather than 15. For many months, 5 of the current 15 CDEICR seats have been vacant and have remained that way despite diligent efforts to recruit qualified and willing applicants to fill them. If you approve warrant Article 16, in the future, after one more seat is vacated, because there's currently 10 people seated on the commission, after one more seat is vacated, the commission will thereafter have 9 active commissioners, and the select board will be better positioned to keep all 9 of those seats occupied with appointees who are fully engaged in the works of the commission, excuse me. The version of the bylaw change that you'll vote on tonight can be found at the bottom of page 16.8 and the top of page 16.9 of the combined reports. The only change to the existing bylaw is the small amount of revised language pertaining to the number of commissioners, and then there's some related language as to quotas. Ongoing vacancies make it difficult for the commission to meet regularly and work effectively on their mission. Reducing the number of seats to 9 and keeping them filled was supported by my former colleague Miriam Ashkenazi, who served as the most recent select board liaison to the commission, and is supported by the current CDEICR chair, Kevin McKenzie, as well as the Committee on Town Organization and Structure. The advisory committee also approved Article 16 while revising the language only slightly, resulting in the motion you have before you. A unanimous select board voted favorable action on the motion as offered by the advisory committee, reducing the number of CDEICR commissioners from 15 to 9. Thank you very much.
Mr. Penzel?
Hello again, my name is Mark Penzel. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 2 and a member of the advisory committee. My name is Mark Penzel. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 2 and a member of the advisory committee. I'm here speaking for a unanimous advisory committee, which with 1 abstention supported this article by a vote of 19-0. You've already heard the reasons for it. Those are the reasons which we use to support this and why we agree with it. I will only add that the only change that we made to the article, which Mr. Van Scoyoc alluded to, was that in the original bylaw, we noted that it references both voting and non-voting members of the commission without explicitly stating who the voting members of the commission are. To eliminate confusion on that point, the committee voted to amend the article to clarify that the 9 commissioners are the voting members. After we did that, we submitted it to the previous moderator to make sure that it was within scope. She said that it was. However, she proposed even better language, which she characterized as a Scrivener's correction, so that it now reads, the commission shall consist of 9 residents who are the commissioners. These commissioners are the voting members of the commission. And for all the reasons that Mr. Van Scoyoc said, the advisory committee recommends unanimously favorable action on the article. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Banka.
Thank you very much. Finally, the microphone is at the correct height. Dick Benka, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 14, speaking for the Committee on Town Organization and Structure. CTOS unanimously recommends a yes vote on Article 16, and I really do want to give credit. Mr. Penzel has done it. We included a clarifying phrase suggested by former moderator Kate Poverman. That phrasing is set forth on page 16-4 of the combined reports in the CTOS report, and it was adopted by the advisory committee and by the select board. So we have unanimity. You've heard the reasons for the change, and that leaves me with please vote favorable action. Thank you.
We have one more speaker, so I'll call on him and then we'll take a vote. Mr. Conquest. Up, he's withdrawn. Okay. Okay, we're ready for a vote. The motion we're voting is on page 16.8 through 16.9. It's a majority vote. A yes is to reduce the CDICR membership. So yes is to approve it, no is not to approve it. Drop the vote. Motion passes 223 yes, 9 no, 2 abstentions. Now we're ready for Article 17, authority to appoint retired police officers as special police officers. The main motion is on 17.3 through 17.5. Its motion is made by Mr. Warren, seconded by Mr. Gordon. Mr. Warren.
That works. It's fast. Paul Warren speaking for the Select Board. Article 17 authorizes the Select Board to file a petition with the General Court for a special act providing for the creation of special police officers to perform police details. If passed, in the General Court, Brookline would be allowed to appoint retired officers to help staff this important work. This authorization would only apply to police officers who have been retired for less than 5 years, that have at least 25 years of service, and are 70 years of age or less. Other communities have similar provisions in place, and the language of Article 17's home rule petition is modeled after those that have passed the State House. The Select Board is supportive of this proposal because it expands the pool of qualified officers that can staff details, resulting in improved public safety. By a vote of 4-0 with one absence, the Select Board recommends favorable action on Article 17.
Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Neil Gordon, Precinct 1, speaking for a unanimous advisory committee. We're asking the state legislature to allow Brookline to appoint qualifying retired police officers so that they can work police details. Filling otherwise vacant positions benefits public safety, increases public police presence, and has the potential to reduce crime. The legislature has passed similar home rule petitions for other communities, and ours, in the words of the advisory committee report, quote, is likely to move smoothly through the State House, unquote. By a vote of 21 in favor, none opposed, and with no abstentions, the advisory committee recommends favorable action. Thank you.
Mr. Vitolo. You have a comment that you wanted to make?
Tommy Vitolo, town meeting member at large. Of course, I will be abstaining from this vote. It is a, shall we say, a more common home rule petition. Whether or not it will move smoothly through the legislature, as the advisory committee suggests, remains to be seen. Unlike the geothermal Article 97, I have until December 31st of this year to get it across the finish line. So a little more time. I'm available to answer any questions on the matter.
Mr. Miller, do you have a question?
I do. Bob Miller, Precinct 2. I have two questions, actually. One is, I'm wondering what the current officers think of this. Is this something that's supported by the department and its members? And also, I was wondering if these retired officers would be part of the union.
Chief? Those sound like pretty yes/no questions.
I'm picking up what you're putting down. Jen Pastor, Chief of Police. The answer to your first question was yes, this petition was developed in conjunction with the police union. The work will go first to the union members, and jobs that are unfilled will go to the retirees. Your second question was, they will not be part of the union.
Okay.
No longer former union members who have retired from the union.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other speakers. I have none on the list. We are therefore ready to vote. The motion is on pages 17.3 to 17.5. Needs a majority vote. Of yes is to approve it, a no is to not approve it. We're ready for the vote. Motion passes 222, 8 no, 9 abstentions. So this brings us to Article 19. Oh, I'm sorry, Article 18, there's no motion. This brings us to Article 19. What I intend to do is there's a series of motions that are going to be read, But the first motion we're going to be voting on is a motion whether or not to lay on the table Article 19. So it's my intent to see what happens with that motion. If that motion passes, we'll then dissolve town meeting. If the motion doesn't pass, we'll be back here on Tuesday to debate Article 19. So the main motion of Article 19 is on pages 19.4 through 19.5, and it's offered by Mr. Mabrook, seconded by Beth Miller. Then there's a motion to lay on the table, which is in supplement 4, page 1, offered by Ms. Fisher, seconded by Ms. Mukhtar. Then there's a motion to postpone indefinitely, which is on supplement 1, page 1, offered by Mr. Rubenstein. Would anyone second it? Have a second? Someone raised their hand? Okay, we have a second from Mr. Friedman. Then we have a motion to refer, and this, of course, will be explained if we ever get to these, which is on page 19-2, which is offered by Mr. Benka. Do I have a second? By Mr. Friedman. Then we have a substitute motion offered by Mr. Gladstone, seconded by Mr. Burstein, which is on page 19-7. Then we have another substitute motion offered by Mr. Seufer and seconded by Ms. Schatz, which is on supplement 3, pages 1 and 2. And lastly, we have a substitute motion offered by Mr. Levy, seconded by Mr. Van Scoyac, which is on pages 19.5 through 19.6. According to town meeting time, a motion to lay on the table does not get debated. The intent is clear. This is the effect of the motion is to not have a debate and dispose of the question. So the motion is put before you. Do you want to lay the article on the table? And is this a point of order?
Yes, it is. Does this have to pass by a 67% or 50?
Yes, it needs a 2/3 vote. Any motion to terminate debate requires a 2/3 vote, and that's what's going on here. So, do we understand the motion?
Sorry.
This is a question,
It is a
not
question.
debating.
It is a question. You said in your introduction that if, oh, I'm
Who are
sorry, John Van Scoik from the Select Board. Thank you for asking. You said in your introduction to the question that if this lay on the table fails, we will be back here Tuesday. But
Correct.
won't we have the option as a body of choosing to stay and actually proceed?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would offer a motion to adjourn until Tuesday, and you would have the option of voting yes or no. A no would be we stay and debate it, and a yes would be we come back Tuesday. So yes, Mr. Van Scoyac is correct. You will have the choice to stay later if you wish. So let's drop the vote. So this is a vote on the motion to lay on the table. A yes lays it on the table and disposes of the question. A no is an indication that you want to debate the question. Let's do it. And please, no applause until the motion is, until the vote is announced, because the clerk needs to hear it one way or the other. Motion passes 181 yes, 42 no, 10 abstentions. Please don't leave yet. Mr. Kaufman, and then we need to vote to dissolve. We can't, nothing takes effect until we dissolve. So please stick around to dissolve town meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ben Kaufman, the Town Clerk. Before we go home, I do want to make sure we extend our deep gratitude and thanks to the employees from Town Hall, from the Police Department, Fire Department, the IT staff, Brookline Interactive Group, the custodians here at Brookline High School. They've all done incredible work over these last 3 nights. Many of these people worked with us on the elections. They were here in March, in May. They will be back again in September and November. They work their regular jobs during the day and then come here at night to make sure we can support this meeting. So I want to make sure we thank all of them. Say hi to them on your way out the door. Say hi to them when you see them back at Town Hall later. And hopefully we'll be able to see them again in November. Thank you all.
Okay, we're ready to vote to dissolve the spring annual town meeting, 2024 annual town meeting. Drop the vote. Effective 5 p.m. tomorrow, so you can correct any mistakes, any misvotes or whatever. Motion passes 223 yes, 5 no, 2 abstentions. The annual town meeting is dissolved.